Let's get it. 580 Sports Talk coming at you on a Wednesday. Hi, hello. How the heck are you? Hope you're enjoying your hump day. If you work in education, you probably got the day off. If you're a school-aged child, you probably got the day off. So shout out to all of you enjoying a snow day today. To the rest of us on our grind, hope it's going well for you and appreciate you spending your afternoon hours with 580 Sports Talk. Here on 580 WIBW FM 104.9, online worldwide at 580WIBW.com, and on our YouTube stream. Yes, indeed, we're live on YouTube today and every day. Search 580 Sports Talk on YouTube. Subscribe to the page. Watch live and archived versions of 580 Sports Talk. I am Dan Lucero. You are hearing my voice and only my voice today. Brendan Dworzinski is traipsing about the MIAA. He's got Washburn basketball tonight. They play Central Missouri. So he is on the road, which means you are in here with me for the next 3.5 hours. That's an important note. You know, usually we go 4 hours, 2 to 6. Today we're off a little early, as we were yesterday, but not quite as early. We're getting out at 5:30 today. Early dismissal for yours truly, as we will be giving way to the K-State Sports Network for K-State women's basketball. The 12th ranked team in the land, the K-State Wildcats, playing host to the Oklahoma Sooners tonight at Bramlage Coliseum. That's a 6 o'clock tip-off, so we'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30, so that's when we'll be done today. Wildcat women trying to start 16-1 for only the 4th time in program history. But up until then, we got a jam-packed show. We got lots to talk about in these 3.5 hours. We're going to talk plenty of Chiefs, about whether this playoff run represents the end of something, the closing of a chapter, if you will, for the Kansas City Chiefs. Going to discuss that, and we'll hear from both offensive and defensive coordinators today. Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo, both spoke to the media and spoke at length. So I think it'll be interesting to hear from both of them. And we will have that audio coming your way here this hour. We'll hear from both Matt Nagy and Steve Spagnuolo. We'll also talk Chiefs with our pal Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report, part of Sports Illustrated's network of team websites. Jordan will join us at the bottom of the 3 o'clock hour to look ahead to the postseason in the National Football League. And we'll ask which teams have the most to lose in these playoffs. And no, not in the literal sense of which teams are going to lose the fastest or which team is going to lose by the most points. No, which teams have the most to lose if indeed they do not claim the Lombardi Trophy at the end of this season. There are probably 5 teams by my reckoning in the playoffs who are Super Bowl or bust. And the only reason it's not 7 is because 2 of them I think have already busted. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show as well. Playing at K-State to talk about on today's program. Wildcats are 2-0 in the Big 12. They crushed West Virginia last night. That game really, I don't think, was as close as the score indicated. I know K-State was down at halftime. That's only because the officials were buying West Virginia's foul grift. Raekwon Battle out there flopping around like Reggie Miller and James Harden combined, and the refs were giving him the fouls every time he shot a three-pointer. If not for that nonsense, K-State would have been comfortably ahead, I think, at the end of the first half. They finished the game comfortably ahead. 14-point win for the Cats. They're 2-0 in league play. 2 dominant wins against maybe the 2 worst teams in the Big 12. We can be honest about that, that UCF and West Virginia are probably going to be league bottom feeders this year. But K-State has played teams that are probably going to be bottom feeders in worse leagues and had more trouble with them in the non-conference than they have had with both the Knights and the Mountaineers. So we'll talk a little bit about why that might be the case, and 2 players really leveling up, and 1 player who showed that he's got a unique skill set that K-State can make good use of, I think, throughout Big 12 play. So we'll talk some K-State hoops. We'll also get into a little bit of KU. We'll look ahead to their game tonight against UCF. However many you think KU is favored by, you're probably overshooting it. And it's interesting that while the pollsters like KU, and while, given the eye test, you think this KU team looks pretty good, the computers don't like these Kansas Jayhawks. What does that mean? Why might that be the case? We'll get into that a little bit later in the show. I mentioned K-State. It's Wednesday, so we do our Wildcat Wrap-Up on Wednesday. That means Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowerCat.com will join us. We'll get Fitz's thoughts on K-State's basketball win last night and look ahead to tougher times ahead, schedule-wise, starting on Saturday with what should be a much sterner road test at the USA, United Supermarkets Arena in Lubbock, against a Texas Tech team that is a bit of a surprising 2-0 in league play after they crushed Oklahoma State last night. Tim Fitzgerald will join us, as he always does on Wednesdays, at the bottom of this 4 o'clock hour. Plus, we'll have What Is Wrong With You at 4:25 or so. As is always the case, we'll do the sports headlines at 5 o'clock. I am going to get in my feelings a little bit about Pete Carroll. I hope you will indulge me a bit when that comes around. That is the big shock sports news story of the day, that Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, stepping aside and taking a role as an advisor within the organization, but no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. 14 seasons, 2 NFC championships, 1, of course, Super Bowl victory. And it should have been 2. But we'll talk about that and all the other happenings today in the sports headlines coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. You are, as always, invited and encouraged to be a part of 580 Sports Talk. There are 2 primary ways that you can do that. Number 1, we got a text line, and that text line is wide open for each and every one of you with a cell phone. You can send me a text at 785-272-9429. That's 785-272-9429. I see all your texts, and if it's a good text, we'll read it on the air, and we'll have some fun with that. You can also interact with me and with anyone else who is watching and listening along in the YouTube comments. Our YouTube live chat is open. I see we've already got some people hanging out talking about the Pete Carroll dismissal in Seattle. Again, that is the big sports news story of the day. And as your resident local Seahawks fan, certainly I have some thoughts, but I'll hold those until 5 o'clock. I promise. We'll talk about the local 11 who's still playing in the postseason first. But do invite you to weigh in on your topics of choice. Text line 785-272-9429. And again, in the YouTube live chat. Chiefs Dolphins on Saturday. And we talk a lot about windows in sports when we're talking about a team that is contending for a championship, a team that enters the season, or as the season evolves, they themselves evolve into a championship caliber team. And we talk about a window in the sense that you have but so much time before your opportunity to win a championship with a certain core group of players closes for good. We talk about it in all of the major sports. Like, for example, the Kansas City Royals championship window was open for 4 years. Their pennant-winning year in 2014, their championship year in 2015. 16 and 17 were part of a championship window, too, before everybody got real expensive and they had to make financial decisions on guys like Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, and the like. But that championship window was open for a couple of years after that World Series title in 2015. And who knows, if Moustakas doesn't get hurt in 2016, maybe that team at least makes the playoffs. But that's the window. Like when we look back at that era of Royals baseball, that was a 4-year window. And if you want to call it a 5-year window because they were a winning team in 2013, I wouldn't argue too strenuously with you there. But a lot of times, particularly for teams that don't reside in the upper crust of baseball cities and markets, your championship window is however long you have until your cost-controlled talent, their costs are now out of your control. And then your window starts to close a little bit for an organization like the Royals. You have championship windows in basketball. You have championship windows in hockey. You have championship windows in football. The unique thing about championship windows in the NFL is it's generally accepted that the thing that most dictates your championship window is who your quarterback is. because with very few exceptions historically, and fewer exceptions as the years have passed, you don't win a championship unless you have an elite quarterback. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, they check that box. I would argue that they're in better shape in that category than any other team in football, because I think that even in a down year for Patrick Mahomes, he is still the best quarterback and the best player in the National Football League. And as long as number 15 is under center, the Kansas City Chiefs will be a real contender to win a championship. That will be every year from now until the skill set diminishes to a point which he is no longer an elite NFL quarterback. And I don't think that's happening like next year or anytime real soon. He's in his athletic prime. He takes tremendous care of himself. He's serious about his body. He's serious about his craft. He's serious about understanding the game. The window for the Kansas City Chiefs is open. It will remain open until further notice. So this is not me saying that this is a typical team in a Super Bowl or bust year. Again, I'm going to talk about this a little later in the show, that there are teams this year that if they don't get it done this year, it might just not happen for them with their current iteration of guys. I don't think that's the case for the Chiefs, obviously. But I was listening to Chris Jones talk to the media yesterday. He had media availability at Arrowhead Stadium, or at the practice facility anyway, after yesterday's practice. And he referred directly to the fact that Saturday's wildcard round game might be the last time he plays at Arrowhead Stadium as a member of the Chiefs. He's aware of the mortality of his Chiefs career. Let me put it that way. And he sounded a little wistful in the process. You could hear it in his voice, where maybe he understands that that's not just kind of a what if, that might be the likely scenario, that the mayor of Sac Nation might put on that familiar red uniform at Arrowhead for the final time on Saturday. I would say it's much more likely than not that that is true. And I think Chris Jones knows that. It might be L'Jarius Sneed's final game in a Chiefs uniform at Arrowhead Stadium. I think that's less likely. I think if one of those two guys gets a big bag from the Chiefs this offseason and they have a big bag to give out, I think it might go to Sneed. Younger player and played at a higher level at his position vis-a-vis Jones at his position this year. But this might be L'Jarius Sneed's final home game, and he has meant a lot to this Chiefs team. Not as much as Chris Jones, you could argue, but he's meant quite a bit. He certainly meant a lot to this year's version of the Chiefs. And while his contract isn't up, and I don't think that he's going to retire, this was the year it became clear that we are much closer to the end of Travis Kelce's career than anyone would particularly care to consider. Like I said, I don't think this is it for Travis Kelce. I don't think he's going to hang up his cleats after this playoff run. But he's 34 years old. He took a beating this year. He was more dinged up, more labored physically than he has ever been in his career. I mean, you have to say it's a non-zero chance, right? Like his brother might hang it up after this year. I know his brother is older, but it feels like we're close to the end with Travis Kelce. And that was not like you could do math and realize that last year that at 33 years old, there are more years behind Travis Kelce than there are ahead of him as an active NFL player. But this was a year, and I have spoken about this before, where it felt like we were more confronted with the career mortality of Travis Kelce. And Kelce himself, I think, was more confronted with his career's mortality this year than in years past. So this playoff run, to me, feels like a last ride of sorts for an iteration of the Kansas City Chiefs that is led in large part by two larger-than-life personalities, Chris Jones on defense, and Travis Kelce on offense. And not just two big personalities, two guys who are a great quote, two guys who are comfortable behind the microphone, two guys that might have busts in Canton someday. I mean, it's not a might for Travis Kelce. That's a definite. Chris Jones scores another first-team All-Pro this year, which he might, and maybe another one down the road. There are going to be some real conversations about Chris Jones as a Hall of Famer in 10, 15 years' time, if it takes even that long. So for those two to maybe be making their last significant playoff runs as significant contributors to the Chiefs, it doesn't feel like the book is closing, but it feels like a chapter is ending, right? Because there's a next chapter of this era of Chiefs football that is yet to be written, but that features more prominently in leadership roles on the defensive side of the ball, guys like George Karlaftis or Trent McDuffie. And it features more prominently in the offense and the number generator that the Chiefs have been on that side of the ball for years, guys like Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice. And yeah, whoever is added this offseason in the draft or free agency gets to be a part of the next chapter too. But it has felt to me for the last couple of months, not just that there is a part of this story that is nearing its end, but that the Chiefs themselves have been aware that there's a part of their story that is nearing its end. I think part of the reason that you've seen such outward frustration from the Chiefs this year on the sidelines is because everybody knows, from the veterans to the guys who are brand new to this, that you can't take a season like this where your roster lines up to the point where the Super Bowl is the expectation. You can't take a year like this for granted. And it felt, for a period of time in November and December, right on up through that Christmas Day embarrassment against the Raiders, that things were slipping away from this team. That this season which had an opportunity to be special, this season that had an opportunity to be one where the Chiefs burnished their credentials as an all-time NFL dynasty. Because you can debate whether or not 2 Super Bowls make a dynasty. There's no debating it if you win 3 in a short time frame as a particular iteration of a team. You win 3 in a short period of time, it's a dynasty. The Cowboys of the 90s, dynasty. Niners of the 80s, dynasty. Steelers in the 70s, dynasty. Those are undisputed. Nobody argues about that. Broncos of the 90s, I mean, they won back-to-back, but they also tricked off a home playoff game to an expansion Jaguars team in 96, and then once Elway retired, it wasn't any good after that. Is that a dynasty? Bronco fans would say yes. Some people would argue for it, but it's a discussion. There's no discussion if you win 3 titles in 5 years. There's no discussion. It's a dynasty. It's a team for all time. And this Chiefs team, confronted with the weight of that history, confronted with the opportunity to be that team for all time, when it started to slip a little bit, I think that's why you saw the reactions you saw on the sidelines. It's why you saw Mahomes react the way he did. It's why you've seen Kelce react the way that he has. It's why you saw Kelce go to bat for Mahomes, or rather Mahomes go to bat for Kelce in that post-game press conference against Buffalo that gets more uncomfortable the further away you get from it. The idea that play took away from Travis Kelce's Hall of Fame legacy. When you're thinking about a player's Hall of Fame legacy in their career, you know that's awareness that time is running short on that career. I say all this to say that I think that the Chiefs felt an opportunity getting away from them at times in November and December, understanding how important this year is to them, understanding how important this opportunity is to 2 guys in particular, in Chris Jones and Travis Kelce, who have been immense parts of everything the Chiefs have built here in the last 6 years. But the flip side of that is, I spoke about this when we convened here on Monday. And I even spoke about it in the wake of the Cincinnati game, too. It felt like winning the game against the Bengals, winning the division, clinching the playoff spot, allowed the Chiefs to reorient their focus in, all right, we're where we want to go. We're where we need to be to get to the ultimate goal. Now let's focus on that. So my expectation is a refreshed perspective and a renewed determination from these Chiefs as the postseason begins. A locked-in mindset, if you'd like. Because I think there is an understanding from on high in this locker room. There's a hierarchy in every locker room, right? And we can agree that the top of that hierarchy in the Chiefs locker room, there's Mahomes, and there's Jones, and there's Kelsey. And there may be some other guys too, but those are the guys at the top of the pyramid, in the pantheon. Those are, you've got two surefire Hall of Famers if they've never taken another snap, and one guy in Chris Jones who, with a couple of more productive seasons in his career, is going to have a hell of a case for Canton himself. Those are the voices that carry in the Chiefs locker room. And for two of them to feel like this may be the last great opportunity here in Kansas City to win a Super Bowl, I think that understanding permeates the locker room. And I think instead now of the worry about getting right and the concern about a playoff berth and the AFC West getting away, all of that now is in the past. And when you have a team with the championship pedigree of the Chiefs, you have the understanding from that locker room, starting on high and filtering down, that everybody's record is 0-0. And that the Chiefs, for everything that went wrong in November and December, are 4 good football games away from another championship. That's the lone focus. The frustration is gone. The worry is gone. The perspective is refreshed. The determination is renewed. And now it's all about one thing: being a team for all time. It's still there in front of the Chiefs. And they've got guys who know it and know that this may be their last best opportunity to get their hands on another Lombardi trophy. We're going to talk a lot more about the Chiefs on this program today. We're going to hear from their coordinators as well here in this 2 o'clock hour. We'll talk to Jordan Foote at the bottom of the 3 o'clock hour, talk more Chiefs with him. Lots of K-State basketball to talk about today. Tim Fitzgerald will join me at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. We've got What Is Wrong With You? We've got headlines, big day in the NFL to get to in headlines. We're here until 5:30 today, and we're glad you're here with us. So stay tuned. We're going to hear from Matt Nagy after this break here on 580 Sports Talk. 2:32 on 580 Sports Talk. We're just getting things started on this edition of the program. Dan Lucero with you today. It's a solo mission. Brendan's out. He's back tomorrow. Both the offensive and defensive coordinators of the Kansas City Chiefs spoke to the media today, and longer than usual media sessions for both Matt Nagy and Steve Spagnuolo heading into this postseason. First off, we're going to hear from Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator of the Chiefs. Here's how his press conference sounded earlier today.
Hey, Matt, Patrick has said a couple times lately things that you wouldn't have said long ago, like we can punt or we don't have to score that many points because of the way a defense is playing. But how does that play out? Sort of, what does it mean when he says that in terms of philosophically for you guys?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when he says that, or when we talk about complementary football, where we're at, the goal is to still always score and be as aggressive as we possibly can. You also want to make sure that however you're being played on defense or where you're at on offense, you want to understand that our defense right now is at an elite level. And so not giving them short fields with turnovers is one. That's stating the obvious, but I think that's what he's getting to is a bad turnover is not going to help our really good defense. Punting the ball is field position. So if something's not there, we don't force it and throw an interception. We don't force a play call, whatever that is. We're smart. We play the field position and understand that our defense has done a great job all year long. It's time tested. It's not something that's been a 3-game stretch.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, is it in fact at this point, like something makes you do things differently than you would have at the start of the season?
No, I don't think so. But I don't think it's that you do things differently. It's just when you're within the play, there's a little bit of that involved is making sure that wherever you're at, we still want to be aggressive. We still want to attack the way we've always attacked. And that's not going to change. That's coach's DNA. That's who he is. That's who we are. That's not going to change with Patrick. With that, though, there's evidence of teams over the years having, this type of mentality. I'm not just saying here, but the ability to stay aggressive but be smart. And now that we're in the playoffs, it's one and done. Understanding that it's complementary football at its greatest right now.
Coach, when you get into the postseason, especially in the weather, it's supposed to be there's an old adage of leaning on the run game, but the run game's been pretty strong for you, despite the statistics saying you're probably middle of the pack in the league. But and you go into a game like this, do you want to focus more on that run game and try to establish that, especially with this type of conditions?
You're right. Everyone says that, but in the end, you have to be able to throw to win. Running the ball is very important, and we've been better. We've improved that. But, I think when you look at all the teams that have made it, whether they're ahead and they stay ahead or whether they're behind and they have to throw, you do need to be able to throw the football. So being able to be balanced, run the football, which we've been better at, is great. It takes pressure off the quarterback. It takes pressure off the O-line. You're not always dropping back, throwing all the time. So with that, though, you got to have effective runs. It can't be, 2 yards, 1 yard, 3 yards. You'd like to get some explosive. That's what I think we've been getting lately.
Coach, I know you work all the offensive line in all the different spots at camp and everything, but this was a real defense and real game that you got a chance to see guys in different spots. What did you think of Tooney at left tackle, Creed at guard, Allegretti at center? How do they look against real competition out of their normal spots?
Yeah, these guys have been playing those spots pretty much their entire career growing up, and now they get to get some spots that they've maybe played in college or where they're at now. So it gives us depth, understanding that in a position where you might have to put them at a different spot, you can do that. And I love their attitudes last week. There was no, I got to play, and they were great. They went out and did a great job, and it only makes them better.
And Creed has had some problems with snaps this year, even going back. I know there was one on the ground in the Super Bowl last year. Where are you on him, and how much does that disrupt Patrick's timing when the ball's on the ground or he has to lean out, reach out for it?
I think that can impact certain play. Like, for instance, if you have a movement where you're trying to catch the ball and run to the right and the snap's to the left, that's where it can impact it. You'd love every snap to be perfect. It's not going to be. But for the most part, I think Creed does a pretty good job. And there's some that jump out. There was one I think was classified as a fumble several weeks ago because it hit the ground at home. But for the most part, he's done a really good job. And Pat does a great job, too, of being able to just catch those snaps, get the laces, not get the laces, and then make the throw.
What about Miami? Are they much different than the team you met in Germany?
Well, maybe people-wise a little bit with the injuries, but schematically a lot of the same stuff. Vic does a really good job. I mean, at breaking down your tendencies of what you do well. He's been doing it for a long, long time. And so not much. There's going to always be some unscouted stuff that you have, but for the most part, he is a successful defensive coordinator because he stays true to what he believes.
You got to look at McCole Hardman for an extended period. How can he fit in? Is it an increased role? Do we expect to see more of him this week?
Possibly a little bit. I think last week was good for him to be able to get in there and play a lot. He played a lot of snaps, make some plays. He's got veteran experience. He's played in these type of games. He always brings that speed element. So I love his attitude. He's been really good since he's been here. And so I think that's what, when you get through that little stretch that we hit, in particular offensively, and you see guys that are just really grinding and staying positive and sticking together, he's one of those guys. It makes it fun in the end.
Is it a lack of focus when he doesn't go for the tackle? Right, like I know your job isn't to teach guys to be.
No,
but like that's.
Yeah, you need to do that. He knows that day one, and we've all, we talk about the effort stuff and the finishing, whether it's finishing a play on offense or if there's an interception, finishing on defense. As a defender.
Back to the running game for a second. How do you grade the production of the running game? Is there certain yards per carry that you look at the end of the day and say, okay, we did a pretty good job here, didn't do a good enough job?
We do internally. We go through, and I think based off of the game plan and how much we were planning on each week, specifically what we thought we could do based off of their strength. I can't give you a specific number right now. I think more than anything, probably the biggest thing for us as a staff has been more than anything is what kind of explosives are we getting? 4+ yard gains. Are you in second and 7+, or are you in second and 6 or less? That's important, and it helps with the plays that come after that.
Matt, how important does short yardage execution and red zone execution become when the season's on the line like this?
Massive. I mean, it's massive every week leading up to it, because you're keeping the football, and then you don't get into a 4th and 1 situation. But I think we've been better with that lately, and I think it's been something that, whether it's situational football in general, is where you see the good teams become great teams when they're successful. So you got to have that.
And what type of
Go ahead.
What type of mentality are you wanting to set in these opening drives against the Dolphins?
Well, it's got to be physical. It's got to be clean. Clean is the biggest thing for us right now. They can do whatever they want to do, and they're going to have some good things on defense. But for us, let's be sharp. Let's be clean. Let's play fast. Whatever we do, let's play fast and be clean.
With Patrick not playing last week, what were your conversations like with him? What did you want him to be focusing on during that week off?
So number one, it was good for him to get a little rest, mentally and physically. That's always great. So he was able to kind of treat that per se as a little mini bye for him, which is good. But then also go back and really tune into the weight transfer in the pocket, the footwork, progressions with his vision in his eyes. Are they going? The stuff we always talk about, but you can really get into it and really take it slow and rep it in practice. But then at the same point in time too, these guys are creatures of habit, so they keep everything the same with what they do day to day. Whether it's what they do in meetings and just to keep that process going. So he did that as well.
One of the things that you guys decided to do this year with your roster was not have a fullback. You finished the regular season out. How did that work? Did you miss the fullback? Do you think that's the way you'll go from now on out with this offense?
I don't. Every year is different, so I can't answer that. I will say I thought the guys did a good job, our tight end room, of being able to have those guys that can kind of play the fullback, tight end, H-back position. Special teams plays into that as well, and whether you have a fullback or not. For the team in general, but I thought the guys did a really good job, and we just want to keep going that route, and just let those guys work to their strengths.
Couple more. By his lofty standards, it was somewhat of a down year for Travis. Got the week off last week. Just what's his mentality kind of going into the playoffs?
I would put it in the same box as what I said with Pat. Number one, physically and mentally, It's a long season. Every year is a little different for him physically with where he's at. I think it's been great for him, just to really lock in on him, make sure that he gets right, he gets healthy, so that he knows we need him, and we know that we need him. So that part was great. Again, somewhat of a mini bye. And then mentally too, you go through the ups and downs, ebb and flows of this season. And he started out like a ball of fire, a ton of numbers, and then it kind of plateaued. But the beautiful thing of all of this is that we're in the playoffs. We're division champs, right? So now it's one and done, and we know that. And what better way to go into the playoffs with those guys on our side, locked in, ton of experience, and they're ready to go.
Last one, anybody?
I just want to ask you kind of on that playoff front. You've got a lot of guys here who played in the playoffs. You got a few guys who haven't had as much, like Rashid and those guys. You've been in some wild playoff games as a head coach, as a coordinator. What's your message about like just that, like what the playoffs mean and how different these games feel than any other game?
You always hear it, and I've heard it with Coach Reed since the day I've been with him as a head coach, and then I lived it in that role, is you say, hey, things are a little bit faster. They just are. And you can't understand that until you're in the moment, and then you get it. So we've been preaching that to the guys to understand that. The practices are a little faster. Everything is just a little bit faster. That's for every team that's in the playoffs. And then each game, it gets like that as well in the playoffs up to the Super Bowl. So, but there's also a balance, and this is where coach is so good, of making sure that you have that focus and you lock in, but you don't press and you don't try to do too much, So keep all that together, still have fun, cut it loose. Don't lose our personalities. Let the guys go out, play with that swag, and let's go have a little fun and cut it loose.
That was Matt Nagy earlier today speaking at One Arrowhead Drive, underlining, I think, over the course of that, two big advantages that the Chiefs have that really nobody else can match or exceed. Number one, the experience of January football and winning January football, not just having been there, but having done that, having won the two Super Bowls with, by and large, this same cast of characters. And the other advantage, having Patrick Mahomes. That's still a pretty good advantage. Still something that, again, and I say this all the time when people say, Lamar Jackson's having a better year, he's going to win the MVP. Yeah, that's true. Oh, this is a down year for Mahomes. Yeah, that's what the numbers say. I know that. But if you broke up all 32 teams, just disassembled them all and made every player a free agent and then did a dispersal draft, the number one overall pick in the NFL dispersal draft would be Patrick Mahomes, and it would not take long to make that pick for whichever GM had it. So two big advantages. Chiefs have to find a way to press those as they get into playoff football. That's offensively. What did the defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, have to say? We'll hear his thoughts after we take this break here on 580 Sports Talk. 2:47 here on 580 Sports Talk. We've already heard from one coordinator. Let's hear from the other. Steve Spagnuolo spoke to the media earlier today. Here's what the defensive coordinator of the Chiefs had to say.
Well, good to be here this week, right? Nothing's for certain. Hope to see you all at this same time next week or on an NFL Thursday of next week. With that, I'll open it up.
I know much has been said about Tyreek, but Arcane and Waddle, the other two guys out there, especially Arcane coming up the backfield, just how do you feel you're going to?
Yeah, they're not. That's not all of them. I mean, you could throw them all in a bucket. They've all got speed. They built it that way, right? But certainly Tyreek leads that charge because of what he can do. And we didn't face 28 last time. I mean, I told the guys that the other day that there's going to be another weapon that we didn't have before, so be prepared for that. So our eyes will be on all of those guys. Like I always say, you can't double them all. But we'll try to find ways to take away the guys going to.
Do you feel like there is an advantage to seeing the team the second time? I mean, for the offense too. I mean,
well, it works both.
Wisdom is it helps the team that lost the game. I feel like that's
well, maybe there may be some truth to that because we all say in this league it's hard to beat a team twice, right? But I mean, I think it helps the players in that they know the person that they line up directly against. But both sides, right? There's no advantage there either way. I'm sure they'll change some things. We'll have a couple of new wrinkles, and it'll be a whole different game. It'll be in a different country, right? Be a different game.
You face good receivers every week, but with Tyreek, because of his abilities, is that kind of a unique challenge? Are there things about playing against him that don't maybe apply any other week?
I would agree with that. We knew when we saw for many years here, or the 4 years that I was here with him, what he could do on the practice field. And you guys know he practices just as fast as he does when he plays the game. So we saw it all. You do have to treat him differently. I think our guys understand that. Proper leverage if we're in man, proper leverage if you're in zone. Have 11 times 2 is 22, have 22 eyeballs on him. Know where he is all the time. I mean, that's part of what we've been saying because he can hurt you in a lot of different ways. I mean, they hand the ball off to him, they jet sweep him, they throw it to him, it screens, the whole thing. And rightfully so, right?
Was there something you could see looking back at the film the last one that you guys did special that day that helped him in the check a little bit? He never really got after.
If there was something, I certainly wouldn't say it right now. But, I mean, we're going to take the things we thought worked good and maybe run more of that and get rid of something that we didn't think was good and then hopefully have a change up here or there. And I'm sure they'll do the same. But they operate pretty efficiently. You guys see it. It's amazing to me. We were saying this morning as a staff with the different motions that they have and multiple on one play. I don't know how they get it. I don't know how they feed it. I mean, I'm amazed at that. Someday I'd like to be on the inside of how they call it and how they get the motions, because it's what we call yo-yo and speed motion, fast motion, slow motion, and the back goes in the backfield, all of it, fast back out. It's pretty dynamic.
Coach, in this last game after Chris's $1 million sack, it looked like you guys had like a
$1 million sack
embrace. What was that moment like? Whatever
you mean when all the guys were jumping up and down?
Talking to Chris.
Yeah. I was happy for him. I mean, we all were. I mean, we all would be, right? I mean, it was something to shoot for. He was out there. It's a little easier to try to get somebody a 15-yard pass completion than it is to say you're going to get a sack. That's not easy. And there's nobody on the other side of the field that wants to allow you a sack. I mean, so he earned it, and I was happy to see that he got it.
Did you tell him to get it early?
We would try, yeah. But when I said that, it didn't work, right? Because it didn't come in, was it the second half by the time we it would have been nice if it was on the first play of the first series. But, thank God. Listen, the part of it was praying he didn't get hurt. I mean, we all know what the risk is there. But it was something he wanted, and I'm glad he got it. And I think it was evident by what you saw after that all the other guys were fired up too.
Rolex too? Is that what he said?
I don't know that. I'm worried about beating, the next team we're playing. That'd be nice, but I'm worried about beating Miami. He's a generous guy. I mean, that's pretty generous. And I think he did it last year for the guys. So
send it our way if.
Okay, all right.
Steve, Patrick said a few times now that they don't need to score as many points as in the years past. They can always punt based on how you guys are playing. Does that mean anything to you? First of all, just to hear it, but also does it mean anything in practice? I mean, in the sense of how it plays out.
Well, I mean, I think I've read the guys say the same thing. It really, nothing has really changes for you on defensively in this league. It doesn't matter whether your offense is scoring 40 or 10. I mean, the goal is to keep points off the board. And we're really proud of what we've done. But it's like I said to, I think the staff or some of the guys, all that's going to be forgotten if we don't rise up when it matters most, right? And so all we've really done, I mean, some of the stats are really good, but all we've really built is some confidence, some chemistry, a foundation to go in and hopefully win what is really now the most important game, right? But it's nice that, that Patrick has confidence in us. I think that guys feel good about that. And we just want to make sure we can live up to that.
Do you see the offense maybe, for lack of a better term, gambling less?
I don't, because I'll be honest with you, I don't get a chance to watch it. I mean, I'll catch a play here or there, and I really don't take the time, certainly in a short week, to go back and look at it. So I honestly don't, I just wait to hear, if we're home. If it gets really loud, that's good. Really, I do that. And then sometimes we're in away games. You hear it loud and like, oh, their defense must have done something good, but we had more people there. Sometimes that's good.
Couple more guys.
Do the conditions factor in?
You talk about in this game?
Yeah.
They may or they may not. I mean, I said to the guys, look, I mean, a lot will be said about this could be an advantage. Nothing. You have to create your own advantages, in my opinion. And the way you create them is in preparation and then doing things in the game to create an advantage. I don't think just the fact that it might be cold we're not going to rely on that. Let's put it that way.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can't keep turning. Yeah.
That is some of what Steve Spagnuolo had to say earlier today at One Arrowhead Drive, getting set for Saturday night's wild card matchup against the Miami Dolphins. I like what he said at the end there, talking about the advantage that the Chiefs are going to have. And they can downplay it, and I don't blame them for downplaying it, but a beat-up team from a warm weather city coming to play in the cold, that is a disadvantage for the Miami Dolphins. That is certainly something that they are going to have to try and overcome. But Steve Spagnuolo is absolutely right, talking about you have to make whatever the game state is, you have to make that an advantage. And how do the Chiefs make it an advantage, making the Dolphins play in colder weather than they're used to? How you make it an advantage? Hit hard and stop the run. Make them have to make plays in the passing game. Make guys have to move around on ligaments and joints that are sore and bothering them to the point where they're missing practice time. That's how you do it. That's how you accomplish that. So, again, not surprised that a veteran defensive coordinator like Steve Spagnuolo, who's been through these wars and has won championships in multiple scenarios, would have his team in the right frame of mind for this Saturday. That's going to do it for our first hour of the program today. Coming up in the 3 o'clock hour, we're going to talk some college hoops. K-State got another win in Big 12 play. They're 2-0. We'll talk about that. We'll look ahead to KU's game at UCF tonight. And Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report will join us to talk some more Chiefs football. That's all coming up, so stay with us. That's hour number 2 of 580 Sports Talk. Let's get it. Hour number 2, 580 Sports Talk coming at you on this Wednesday. Hi, hello, and how the heck are you? Hope you're having an outstanding Wednesday. The sun is back. Hopefully, the roads in your neighborhood have cleared, and hopefully you're enjoying this edition of 580 Sports Talk. Glad you're along for the ride, whether you're listening on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or checking out the YouTube stream. Hi, YouTubers. We're on YouTube at 580 Sports Talk. Check out the live stream every day. Check out archived editions of the program. Subscribe to 580 Sports Talk on YouTube. And then when you go to youtube.com, you won't have to go digging for us. We'll just be right there on the front page every day we have a show, or every time we do any live content. You can check us out. So appreciate those of you who are listening that way. Or any way you're consuming the show. Just glad you're along with me. I am Dan Lucero. I am the only voice you are hearing today for now, because Brendan Dworzinski is on the road. Washburn basketball is at Central Missouri tonight. So he's going to lovely Warrensburg. Not the worst drive in the conference by any stretch of the imagination. But back in my time, when I was doing Washburn games with Jake LeBon, it was never one I particularly relished. I can say that, but hopefully it's not too treacherous, and Brendan makes it there. And Washburn basketball is coming your way tonight over on Classic Country 106.9, 5:30 women's game, 7:30 men's game. Both the Ichabod men and women playing some good hoops, but they go to the always tough multi-purpose building to take on the Jennies and the Mules tonight. Always hard games in Warrensburg. So again, that's where Brendan's at. That's why it's just me today. But again, I really do appreciate you hanging out with me here this afternoon. Coming up later, bottom of this hour, Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report is going to join me. We'll talk some Chiefs, look ahead to the postseason to come. Coming up in the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour, our friend Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com is going to join in. And we're going to talk about K-State's 2-0 start to Big 12 play and all of the other news that's fit to print or fit to discuss about K-State athletics. That's coming up at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. You can participate in the show today. Your texts at 785-272-9429. Get your text in. If you watched K-State's game against West Virginia last night, would love to hear your thoughts, your reactions, your impressions of this K-State basketball team through 2 Big 12 games. You can also post your comments on the YouTube stream. We have a live chat. If you're watching the YouTube, one of the cool things you can do on the YouTube is you can participate in a live chat. And you can leave thoughts in there, and we can get to those on the show as well. So those are the ways you can make your voice heard on this edition of 580 Sports Talk. Let's talk K-State hoops here to kick off this 3 o'clock hour. And we'll start with the caveat. It's the same caveat that we had to include when we were talking about their win Saturday at home against UCF. The team that Kansas State was playing was not good. West Virginia stinks. Like, that's not a good team. It would not surprise me if by the end of this Big 12 season that the bottom 2 teams in the conference were UCF and West Virginia in some order. It wouldn't surprise me. UCF came into that game with a losing record, and they're different now than they were when they started the season. They had a bunch of 2-time transfers that they couldn't get eligible. They've got one they still haven't gotten eligible, but at the very least now they've got Noah Farrakhan. Aziz Bendogo is the one that can't get eligible. But they've got Noah Farrakhan back, and Kirk Kriisa is playing, and Raekwon Battle is playing. And so it's a different composition now. But even now, with those guys back, they're without Jesse Edwards, who's their best post player, really their only scoring threat inside. So it's a team with some not awesome vibes right now. And you feel bad for Josh Eilert. He's a Kansas guy. He's a K-Stater, and thrown into a tough situation. and less than ideal circumstances for this opportunity. But like West Virginia doesn't even play great basketball, to be honest with you. A lot of grift to their game. Raekwon Battle out there, he grifter number one, jumping into guys from the start of the game, shooting threes and just jumping into defenders trying to get calls. And he got them. They fouled him 3 times on 3-point shooting. You maybe see a 3-point shooter fouled like once in a game. K-State did it 4 times in the first half. And while it's lame that you're hunting for that call and you're grifting in the way that Raekwon Battle was, little kick out at the defender like Reggie Miller used to do back in the day. Like, it was one thing when Reggie Miller did it because he's one of the greatest basketball players ever. Raekwon Battle's just a guy. I don't appreciate the grift. The basketball gods will not smile upon that for long, is all I have to say to Raekwon Battle. The basketball gods are not pleased. You have irked the basketball gods with your grifting. There was some grifting going on for West Virginia in that game from Battle. I mentioned they have Kirk Kriisa back. He's an experienced point guard. Experienced doesn't always mean good. Kirk Kriisa is certainly a legend in his own mind. I think if he were as good as he thought he was, he would probably sweep the Major Player of the Year awards in the conference. And speaking of grifting, he bought West Virginia some free throws late in the first half by flopping. I've never seen a guy flop the way he did when David Gasson is coming over to try and separate the West Virginia players from the K-State players after a foul on that was going to send Tyler Perry to the line. And he's trying to reach out to put his arm around the guys and bring everybody in. I don't think he even sees Kirk Kriisa, and Kriisa flops when there's the barest contact made with Gasson, and he got a technical foul out of it. It was a disgrace. Have a little pride, Kirk Kriisa. Just not impressed with his game. He really thinks he's a lot better than he is. And even with all of that, even with the frustration over the whistle and the grifting, K-State had to rally in this game. They were down by 2 at the half, and then they dominated the second half. They outscored West Virginia 41-25. And yes, I will go back to the original caveat that West Virginia is stinky. That is not a good team right now. Maybe they'll play better ball when Battle and Kriisa and Farrakhan have more games together and they get Edwards back here in a couple of weeks. They're targeting a return for him for the KU game. They play KU on the 20th, I believe, of January. That would be pretty significant for West Virginia if they could get him back for that game, because they had nobody else who could really even play in the post. But yeah, it's not a good team. Facts. K-State, better team, man for man, better players, and you should win in that instance. When you have better players and you're the better team, you should win those games. But as Houston learned the hard way last night, as everybody in this league knows, everybody who follows this league knows, there are no easy nights on the road in the Big 12. There just aren't. You cannot take a win in this league for granted, no matter who you are playing, no matter where the game is being played, no matter what the atmosphere in the arena might be. It is always, always, always hard to win Big 12 games. And the more of them you get, particularly on the road, the closer you get to the NCAA tournament. Jerome Tang said before Big 12 play started, felt like they win half of their Big 12 games, they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Well, they've picked off 2. 2 that on paper they had to have, but they didn't put a foot wrong, and they dominated. And that, I think, also goes to show that any concern that you might have had as a K-State fan when this team went to overtime with Oral Roberts and struggled to put away North Alabama. That game might have gone overtime too, now that I'm thinking about it. Or when they struggled with Chicago State just a week ago, right? Week and a day ago. And you had some concern because those were overmatched opponents and Kansas State looked to be playing with their food and they were probably lucky to beat Oral Roberts. I think those concerns now can be set aside because now that conference play is here, and more importantly, now that K-State has the team that they're going to have for the rest of the season. It might have been in the back of their mind through November and December, well, we're going to get Naquan Tomlin back eventually, and we're going to get Quest Glover back eventually, so, we're kind of just biding our time until we're the best version of ourselves. Well, Naquan Tomlin isn't walking through that door, and if Quest Glover's walking through that door, he's doing it on crutches. So these are your Kansas State Wildcats. And I think that probably benefits guys to know, all right, there are no reinforcements coming. My role is my role. I have an opportunity to expand on my role in practice or with good performances in games, but this is the team. Like Gene Hackman's line in Hoosiers, right? My team is on the floor. And Jerome Tang's not playing with 4 guys, but the sentiment is the same. Like the team you have is the team you have. And so with that focus and with the understanding that, okay, now these are league games, the rubber has met the road, we got to go and we got to win these games. Kansas State is not only winning these games, but they are doing so convincingly. And I think that matters. I think winning these games convincingly is more important than not beating Chicago State or North Alabama convincingly. So steps in the right direction for Kansas State. 2 guys, actually 3. There are 3 guys I want to talk about in particular from last night's game for Kansas State. The first guy is Cam Carter. He's going to get some first-team all-league votes at this pace. He had 23 last night, 4 assists, 3 boards, couple steals, had a block shot. Biggest thing for Cam Carter, the shot wasn't falling for him last night. Really, the three-point ball wasn't falling for anybody but Arthur Kaluma last night. Carter and Tyler Perry were combined 2 for 12 from behind the arc. And K-State's offense got stuck a little bit midway through the second half. You know what good players do when the offense is stuck? You try and get to the free throw line. And now there's a difference between Raekwon Battle launching himself and kicking his leg out at closeout defenders when shooting a 3, that kind of trying to get to the line, that kind of grifting, and what Cam Carter was doing. Cam Carter was attacking the rim. Cam Carter was going to the basket and drawing contact and getting to the free throw line and finishing those trips to the free throw line. 10 of 10 on the night from the line. He's shooting like 87% from the stripe. He's been terrific there. And that was exactly what K-State needed. They needed somebody. When West Virginia had cranked up the defensive pressure, when they had reeled K-State back in a little bit, it felt like K-State was going to really put the game away early in the second half. They had sprinted out to a 10-point lead. Then West Virginia got it to 5, and there's a little noise in the building, and that's where it can get tough on the road. And Cam Carter settled the game down. He took matters into his own hands and took control of the game and seized the momentum back for K-State by getting to the free throw line. That was super impressive from Carter. You know who else was impressive last night? David Gasson. He has been terrific these last handful of games. Really, you go back to the Wichita State game, and this has been the best stretch of Gasson's K-State career. He had 17 on 7 of 8 shooting last night, made all 3 of his free throws, and also pulled down 7 boards. If you are a K-State basketball watcher, I will judge your knowledge of ball by what you think of David Gasson. Because when you watch Gasson, he is playing at a really high level right now. And I don't just mean the scoring and the rebounding. That's nice. They don't need him to score 17 tonight, but if he can give them that, that's exceptional. But what I really like about Gasson's game is how switchable he is on defense. When he's out there, K-State can switch everything, and he can hang on the perimeter. For a guy his size to be able to stay on a guard and defend well on the perimeter, it makes your defense that much better to have a guy like that. He's sort of like defensively like the queen on the chessboard in some ways, because he can guard a point guard and he can guard a 5. That's a rare defensive piece to have. And he's playing well on that end. It's, I think, giving him confidence on the other end. The free throws are starting to fall after he had started the year like 29% from the line. The free throws are starting to fall for Gasson. He's getting better and better. And we're talking about two guys. When we talk about Kansas State, we assumed when this season began, this was a group that would go as far as Tyler Perry and Arthur Kaluma and Naquan Tomlin would carry them. Like those were going to be the three for Kansas State. And Perry has certainly had his moments. He wasn't great last night. Obviously, didn't shoot it well. 1 of 8 from the field, 1 of 6 from deep, only 6 points, 5 assists, but 4 turnovers. It wasn't a great game for Perry in truth. But late in the game, when K-State wanted to shorten the game and play a little bit of ball control, he did a nice job of making sure the offense ran smoothly and didn't get sped up, didn't have any needless turnovers late in the game. So Perry was not his best, not an A game from Perry or probably even a B game, but it was good enough. Kaluma was good last night, but he was in foul trouble, had 17 points, hit 4 threes. K-State's going to be hard if he makes 4 threes in a game. It's going to be hard to beat him. But Carter and Gasson becoming this for K-State, I think shows that this coaching staff as a developmental staff is really doing outstanding work. Cam Carter coming into this year, I thought would be a nice player for K-State. I did not expect him to be playing like one of the best players in the conference. David Gasson, I thought would be a contributor for this K-State team. I did not expect him to be this valuable to Kansas State. That is a testament to Jerome Tang and his coaching staff for getting those guys to buy into what they could be and reach that potential as this season has gone on. Really, really impressive stuff. I'm impressed with both of those guys right now. One other guy I want to talk about real quick from last night's game. I want to talk about Jarrell Colbert, who played only 6 minutes, kind of forced into duty because K-State had some foul issues that they were dealing with. David Gasson ended up with 4 fouls. Kaluma picked up 2 pretty early in the contest. McNair, I think, got 2 early, got 2 in the first half. Finister got in some foul trouble. It's first guy off the bench. But Jarrell Colbert, in his 6 minutes, blocked 2 shots, and they were violent blocks. I have said all year that one of Kansas State's weaknesses as a team is they don't have a lot of size at guard, and so bigger guards can get downhill and attack Tyler Perry defensively or attack Cam Carter defensively or attack Day-Day Ames when he's out on the floor defensively. Because Will McNair, not a classic rim protector. Gasson's getting better in that regard, but he's not an eraser around the paint. Jarrell Colbert is an eraser. That is an X-factor kind of player coming off the bench. If K-State needs rim protection, if teams are getting to the rim, getting to the paint too readily, Jarrell Colbert proved last night that he's a real bona fide option to come in and put a lid on the basket with some block shots. He's big, he's athletic, he's physical. He was a +9 in his 6 minutes last night. They were big minutes. And for a guy that we haven't hardly talked about all year, a guy who was almost persona non grata for Jerome Tang when he was asked about him a week ago, to come in, be prepared to come in a situation like that on the road and play that well and give what he could. Again, testament to the coaching staff, testament to where these guys all are mentally. They're a mentally tough basketball team, and that starts with leadership. So, again, you should beat West Virginia. You should sweep West Virginia this year. K-State doing what they should do. And I understand if you're not ready to give credit or give plaudits to K-State for doing what they ought to do. But they're doing what they ought to do in an impressive fashion, and they got guys getting better. They are improving as a basketball team. And they might have yet another level they could still get to as a group. Encouraging performance from them. They're back in action Saturday at Lubbock. What about KU? They play tonight at UCF. We're going to talk about that game when we come back on this edition of 580 Sports Talk. 3:28 on 580 Sports Talk. Dan Lucero with you on this Wednesday. Going back to our K-State conversation. Vance in the YouTube comments says, while encouraged by K-State's Big 12 start, I'll be more comfortable when they play against more challenging teams. Certainly, they have gone through whatever the opposite of Murderer's Row is in this league. I had bad brain last night and thought they were going to Stillwater next. I said, oh my gosh, they might play the three worst teams in this league in their first three games. Oklahoma State got pummeled by Texas Tech last night. Tech scored 90 points. They had a player also incredibly accused of committing a sexual assault in the Bahamas during their multi-team event in November, Pop Isaacs, and he's still playing? That threw me. And he's playing really well. He had 20 last night. It's interesting that he is getting to play. I mean, they ran it's a civil suit, I guess, and they ran everything through the channels, through Title IX and everything, and determined that he could still play. So that's a Texas Tech decision, not a basketball decision, but still kind of wild that something like that gets reported and you just keep trotting the guy out there like he's not being sued civilly for something like that. It's just some programs might handle it differently is all I'm saying. But speaking of Texas Tech, they're up next for the K-State men. That is Saturday night. K-State women are in action tonight. 6 o'clock tip. The number 12 team in the country takes on Oklahoma. You can hear it right here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9. We're going to get out early on 580 Sports Talk tonight so that we can bring you the K-State Sports Network's coverage of that. We'll be off at 5:30 ahead of the pregame show. KU men are in action tonight. They are at UCF. First ever meeting between UCF and KU in men's basketball. Earlier today, Kansas was favored in that matchup by 7.5. It is still 7.5. And all the juice is on UCF at plus 7.5. And you may be thinking to yourself, wait a second. KU's the third-ranked team in the country. UCF lost their conference opener by 25 points. Why is KU only favored by 7.5 tonight? And this is the simplest explanation of it I can give you. The computers don't like KU. Humans, people with eyes, they like Kansas a lot. They're third in the AP poll, even though that's down a spot from last week. And after number 1 and number 2 both lost to unranked teams yesterday, KU's in line to go back to number 1 if they win out this week. In fact, it would almost be a shock if they didn't rank number 1 if they win both of their games in Big 12 play this week. So the polls have liked KU from the beginning, and typically they are an analytics darling. Typically they rank very highly in things like the KenPom or the net rankings or Bart Torvik's numbers or ESPN's BPI. Not this year. Not these Jayhawks. KU is 16th in the KenPom going into tonight. 15th in the net ranking. Give you an idea, that's below Iowa State. That was below Iowa State before they beat Houston last night. The computers thought more highly of an Iowa State team who had one win over G5 competition in non-conference play. One. They beat Iowa. Beat the heck out of Iowa. But that was their only G5 win in the non-con. And they still ranked above KU in the net even before beating Houston last night. KU's also 17th in the BPI, that's ESPN's metric, and 18th in Bart Torvik's rating. So a top 5 team according to the people who vote. A team in the mid-teens, late teens, when you look at the analytics of it. And that's fascinating to me. And the only thing I can guess is that I think analytics like teams who really shoot the three effectively, and KU obviously doesn't do that. KU's pretty dependent on scoring inside the arc. They are not a great three-point shooting team. And if I had to guess what's hurting their metrics, it's probably that. But, you know, the net ranking doesn't matter until March, and none of these things really matter at all. You keep winning basketball games. If KU keeps winning, they're going to keep moving up those particular rankings. They're going to win tonight. I don't have any doubt about that. I mean, UCF can throw a little size at Hunter Dickinson. I'm sure Addition Financial Arena will be jumping tonight. But unless KU has another 20-plus turnover performance in them like they did against TCU, I cannot imagine UCF winning this game. And I am shocked that the line is what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my friendly neighborhood online sportsbook of choice, and I'm going to make sure I get that 7.5 number before it moves at all, because I am very confident that KU will win and win handily in Orlando tonight. We're going to step aside for a quick break here. And on the other side of this break, Jordan Foote's going to join us. Jordan Foote covers the Kansas City Chiefs for Arrowhead Report, part of the Sports Illustrated network of team websites. He's going to join us. We're going to talk about the Chiefs. Have the vibes been restored? What's their biggest challenge going into the playoffs? Who's their worst matchup? And we'll get a Super Bowl prediction from Jordan as well. That is coming up next as you're listening to 580 Sports Talk. Welcome back into 580 Sports Talk on this Wednesday. Dan Lucero rocking solo with you this afternoon as Brendan Dworzinski is off on his adventures in the MIAA. Pleased to be joined right now on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline by Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report, covers the Kansas City Chiefs. You can follow him on Twitter at Foote with an E at the end. Noted, Foote noted. Jordan, it's playoff time. The Chiefs' vibes the last 2 months have been a bit of a roller coaster ride. Have they restored a little bit of the positive vibe, though, the last couple of weeks with the win over Cincinnati and the obvious fun everybody seemed to be having on the sideline watching the backups beat the Chargers, which, I mean, at least they were having fun. It wasn't a whole lot of fun to watch if you weren't on that sideline, I don't think. But have they restored the vibes a little bit? Do you get the sense that some of the clouds have parted over this Chiefs team as the playoffs began?
Yeah, I do think so. And you hit the nail on the head by just a little bit is probably the most accurate summation of that. And really, it probably comes back to the wide receiver group. I don't think Patrick Mahomes was lacking for confidence in himself. Travis Kelce, the same. They have a really good set of leaders on both sides of the ball. But that wide receiver room, when you had Sky Moore out there playing and it wasn't working for him, when you had Kadarius Toney playing, it wasn't working for him, MVS with all the drops. Now, I know that you have to be supremely confident to be a high-level athlete and to be in the NFL, but they see and hear the things people are saying. I mean, I wouldn't feel great about it. So to get the swag surf thing going on, have a little bit of swagger back, it's not like they're peaking at the right time necessarily because they still weren't playing great football, but mentally you want to be in the right headspace heading into the biggest part of the season. And I do think, A, having a home game, B, getting a little bit of rest and kind of hitting the reset button, and then C, getting that confidence back, that's going to help at least a bit.
How important do you think that week of essential rest was? They got what was effectively a bye for their most important players, not having to play Mahomes and Kelsey and the like in that game against the Chargers. Do you think that was more important physically or mentally for this team?
I think it's player dependent. Now, Travis Kelce definitely physically, because you have seen all year he had the knee injury, he had the ankle injury, and then it was like an elbow, then it was a neck, and he appeared on the injury report limited last week in practice with a neck injury. So definitely good to get the physical reset. But I do think, Dan, that mentally it's a really big break. And it's not like everyone said, oh, the Chiefs need to get out there and play because they need continuity with the wide receiver room. Like, they're not going to get in a game at this point anything they haven't got all year. They're not going to magically teach people how to catch the ball. The routes are not going to get that much cleaner. The timing isn't going to get improved. You aren't going to get that by getting into a game. You get that with reps. You get that with practice. You get that with the player either can do it or can't do it. So getting that break, hitting the reset button, taking a step back, I think was objectively the right call, instead of trying to give them a half or a quarter or playing the full game in a meaningless seeding and no playoff implications matchup. So definitely physically for the guys that were battling, but it is a mental game. Every sport is, but football definitely is too. And I think the Chiefs being able to decompress, I guess you could say, is definitely a good thing for them.
Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report is our guest here on 580 Sports Talk, joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline. Jordan, let's just talk about this playoff run that is to come for the defending Super Bowl champs. And I want to start with what the Chiefs have to accomplish on defense. If there is going to be a carrying position group on defense, which group is most important to the Chiefs' defensive success, and by virtue of that, the overall success of this team if they're going to make a deep run this January?
It's got to be the secondary, and you can say the pass rush, but I think that is also a little bit of a byproduct of that. They go hand in hand. But this Chiefs defense, man, second in points allowed, second in yards allowed this year, fantastic points per drive. You can break down just about any stat besides like rushing EPA. The Chiefs kind of struggled there, but this pass defense has been absolutely fantastic, and they're playing a really good team. Now, they are banged up. Jalen Waddle is iffy. Tyreek Hill, a little bit limited last week. Tua, the jury's still a little bit out on him in big games. But if they do advance in the playoffs, they're going to play the Josh Allens of the world, probably the Lamar Jacksons of the world, potentially, heck, even a CJ Stroud down the line if a couple upsets happen. So the Chiefs need to have everything fall into place in the secondary. And L'Jarius Sneed getting some time off, again, a physical reset for him. Trent McDuffie getting a little bit of a mental reset. Mike Edwards is playing good football. So the secondary can help the front four. And really, when you're employing Trent McDuffie like that, he can be a really good blitzer. And Steve Spagnuolo has used him in different sub packages. So I think the secondary makes everything else go. It's the straw that stirs the drink that has been a really good defense this year. So if they keep that up, then I think they have a pretty good chance to limit opposing offenses.
It wasn't an offensive explosion by any means last time we saw the Chiefs' first team offense on the field. They had just the one touchdown drive against the Bengals, did get 6 field goals from Harrison Butker. scored 25 points. And in some ways, kind of similar to what we've seen in a negative way, where the team has moved the ball pretty well between the 20s, but haven't been able to finish drives. And they did have the turnover that led directly to 7 Cincinnati points. But in the sense that they balanced the run with the pass, they hit on a couple of deep shots in the passing game, which has felt very few and far between this year. Was there, in that game against Cincinnati, a realistic winning formula for this Chiefs offense as they head into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. And you can really you can strip it bare bones and say they scored 25 points. If they do that in every playoff game, can they get to the Super Bowl? I think the answer is yes. Now, you're just not giving yourself as much leeway, though, when you're forcing your defense to stop someone and force them to 20 points or 21 or 17, whatever it's going to be. But the Chiefs left some meat on the bone against the Bengals, too. They went 3 for 12 on third down. They didn't always play their cleanest football. They had the play where Trey Hendrickson beat Wanya Morris and had the strip sack that led to Bengals points. So you obviously don't think that kicking that many field goals is conducive to winning a playoff game against better teams, but the Chiefs got their 25 how they needed to. You factor in the slim chance that the drop/turnover luck regresses even a little bit, and the possibility of Andy Reid having something to either simplify or enhance the offense, and Rashee Rice having the mental adjustments, and Travis Kelce having a week off. Like, this Chiefs offense is not going to bounce back to what it was last year. I don't think it's going to come close, but if they could bridge the gap from some of the games where they've looked like a bottom tier unit and then some of the games where they've been middling, if they can just stick like that and be, let's say, a top 12 caliber offense for the rest of the postseason, they have a chance. Now, the problem is they've shown who they are all season, and that's a very sloppy, unbalanced offensive team. You always worry about Andy Reid going away from the run, but like your initial question was, they have the formula. I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate it or stick to it, but if they follow a similar game plan and then lean on the defense, it's not going to be pretty, but I do think that gives them a pretty fair shot.
I talked about this at the top of the show. You go into the playoffs, usually you have your teams that are happy to be there. You have your teams that are maybe feeling like this is the beginning of something, that they're just starting to enter a competitive window. Then you always have teams that feel like they're about to exit a competitive window. That might be the case for the Bills, might be the case for the Dolphins. It might even be the case for the Eagles with all of the financial decisions they've got to make. The Chiefs are in a position where they have the quarterback where we're not close to the end of the competitive window in the Mahomes era. But given some of Chris Jones's comments and the fact that Jones has played this entire year on the one-year deal, but some of the comments he made yesterday about realizing this might be his final game at Arrowhead, watching Travis Kelce this year and realizing finally that we are closer to the end of his career than we are to the beginning, does it feel as though this playoff run maybe takes on a little bit more importance for this team because there are some ways in this that this is the end of something?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really, we knew when all of this started that Patrick Mahomes was going to outlast Chris Jones in Kansas City, that he was going to outlast Travis Kelce in Kansas City, a lot of the coordinators, Andy Reid, like, this is going to end at some point. But like you said, with Mahomes, you realistically expect, barring just an objectively bad roster, which I don't think the Chiefs are going to be faced with in the very near future, you expect them to compete deep in the playoffs. Now, for them, the goal is always a Super Bowl. I think even looking back in retrospect, that was the right call for this year, and they still technically have that in front of them despite some of the challenges. So it's going to look different. This is really the third act, I guess you could say, of the Mahomes era, and then this offseason is going to be the big rebuild offseason that people thought the last one was, and the one before that. So it's all kind of coming together. This thing is going to come to an end. Chris Jones might not be a Chief next year. Travis Kelce is not the same player that he was. We don't know how much longer he's going to play. So you want to maximize every little bit and every little opportunity you get. Now, luckily for the Chiefs, I think they're going to have plenty of bites at that proverbial apple, and they'll be able to go to the playoffs almost every year, if not every season, for the next, let's say, 10 to 12 years, which relatively unprecedented stuff they're already doing. They have everything they want ahead of them. It's going to be a little scary when major pillars of the organization fall over, but you still have the biggest one in place. So I do think they can do the right stuff to avoid, let's say, a Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers type situation where the team's a little bit iffy. You still have the generational quarterback talent. Everything else is questionable. They aren't there yet. And I think this is a big offseason to ensure that they don't get there. But you do definitely want to maximize the long-standing kind of franchise cornerstone team. And this might be one of the last years, if not the last one, that they have that star trio in place of Mahomes, Kelsey, and Jones.
Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report joining us here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline on 580 Sports Talk. You can follow him and check out all of his work on Twitter at Foote Noted. That's Foote with an E at the end. All right, Jordan, which team in the AFC is the worst matchup for the Chiefs if they were to play them in the postseason?
That's a tough one. You want to say Baltimore naturally just because they don't have many holes on that team. And I think if Lamar Jackson would have got them to, let's say, an AFC championship game in the past, there would literally be 5 people out there probably doubting the Ravens, but we just haven't seen him do it yet. So on paper, I think Baltimore is the best team in the AFC. I think defensively they're fantastic, even with the secondary being a little bit banged up. I think the offense is great. Lamar has really transformed himself as a pocket passer and still has the running ability. I think Buffalo, they're just weird with the Chiefs. They match up well with them. You get the random Gabe Davis game. Now he's banged up to a lot of injury storylines in the AFC. But I think it's really on paper, Baltimore, just because of how good they are, how deep they are, the talent and all of that. But head to head, if the Chiefs win this game and Buffalo beats Pittsburgh, you're going on the road to Buffalo. Then if you beat them, you're probably going on the road to Baltimore, barring something crazy happening in the divisional round. So they have their work cut out for them. But I think head to head, given the recent history between the two teams, I'll go with the Bills. But they can get got, I believe, a lot easier than the Baltimore Ravens can.
Finish this sentence for me. If the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, it will be because blank.
Patrick Mahomes, I think, or I guess you could say regression to the mean. The wide receivers don't play terrible. They just play bad or something like that. But it's also going to have to be Mahomes had that stretch where they played the Patriots. I believe Buffalo was mixed in there, maybe the Green Bay game. Like he had 3 out of 4 where he was he was just very deliberate and intentional in what he was doing. He was trusting himself. He was trusting the wideouts. And I know it's hard and it's easy for us to say, man, you got to throw Tony the ball. You have to throw it to MVS, even if you don't want to, stuff like that. But he legitimately was just firing it out there, taking the checkdowns with a bunch of energy, just very deliberate, very precise, very surgical. And it might have to be that type of postseason for the Chiefs. Again, they're not going to get style points if they win the Super Bowl. I don't think it's going to be a high-flying offense. They're going to have to lean on some of the things they've flashed a little bit, the running game, get under center, run some play action, bring some of that there. So it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but I think the byproduct of that could be, as a side effect, the pass catchers just improving just a little bit because they have a ton of room to. And if they're just bad instead of terrible, then the Chiefs are going to have a pretty decent chance.
Couple more questions for Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report here on 580 Sports Talk. Which game in Super Wild Card Weekend? I really hate the name Super Wild Card Weekend. Which game in Super Wild Card Weekend are you most excited to watch?
I think the Sunday night Rams-Lions game, and I have some personal interest in that one, but the Jared Goff revenge storyline, everyone wants to bring up Stafford and Detroit, and that's fantastic. It's going to be fun. I think the Lions will welcome him back, but because of that reason, the Jared Goff revenge storyline is legit. Man, you can say, okay, Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs, and if the Dolphins come into Arrowhead and win, Tyreek Hill's going to talk his talk, but really, NPC secondary, the Rams just don't have a bunch of good players there. It's a bunch of young guys. If he throws for like 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, gets the win, something like that, he will have the right to talk his talk because that franchise kind of gave up on him and Sean McVay knew that it wasn't going to work. So you combine that with Sunday Night Football. It's the wild card round, the Lions hosting their first playoff game in however many years. I think that's going to be really fun.
And lastly, Jordan, who is going to win this Super Bowl and who are they going to beat?
Oh, man. I think it's going to be a rematch of the game we just had a couple of weeks ago where it was San Fran and Baltimore. I think San Fran's going to do it, and Shanny is finally going to get over the hump. I don't really feel great about that because both of those teams have question marks about the quarterbacks in the playoffs and finishing the job. So it's ironic that that's my pick, but they're just the two best teams, I think. And sometimes it comes down to that, and the best team may not always get there or win, but I'm going to go with that this year. I know it's not a crazy pick, but just kind of how I felt lately.
Jordan Foote covers the Kansas City Chiefs for Arrowhead Report. You can find him on Twitter at FootNoted. If you do follow him on Twitter, see if you can figure out who his favorite NBA team is, because I'm still trying to figure that out myself, Jordan. I cannot pin down your allegiance on the hardwood quite as readily as I can single out your fondness for all things Matthew Stafford.
I respect that. It's the Miami Heat, and I promise it was before LeBron got there. Young Jordan was watching Wade in the finals with Shaq, but it is the Miami Heat, and some days I love them, and some days they kind of give me a little bit of pain. So we'll see.
That's called being a sports fan, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's just as a matter of course. Jordan Foote from Arrowhead Report. You should follow him on Twitter. He's a good follow at Foote with an E at the end. Noted. Jordan, thanks for the time, man. Appreciate rapping with you. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan.
That is Jordan Foote, and we appreciate him taking some time out of his day to talk Chiefs and NFL postseason with us. That's going to wrap up this 3 o'clock hour of the show. We got an hour and a half left after this. Again, making way at 5:30 for the K-State Sports Network. K-State women's basketball in action tonight against Oklahoma. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, we'll have What Is Wrong With You. We'll talk to Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowerCat.com, get his perspective on the K-State men and their 2-0 start. Maybe get his thoughts on the women's game tonight as well, plus any K-State football news we can gnaw on. But we'll start the hour with a discussion about which NFL teams have the most to lose this postseason. I don't think the Chiefs are on that list. We'll talk about it. So come on back with us after this news break. This is 580 Sports Talk. Let's get it. Hour number 3 of 580 Sports Talk on this Wednesday afternoon. Hope it's been a good hump day for all of you out there. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're hearing us on 580 AM WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or via our live YouTube stream. We are 580 Sports Talk on YouTube. Subscribe today. Watch us live. Watch archived editions of the program and all of our live streaming video content. However you are listening today, we appreciate you being along for this edition of 580 Sports Talk. I'm Dan Lucero. Again, it's been a solo mission for yours truly today. Brendan Dworzinski is in Warrensburg, Missouri, getting set for Washburn men's and women's basketball. They tip off at about an hour and a half. You can hear that over on Classic Country 106.9. Brendan will be back with me on tomorrow's show. We've got an hour and a half left on today's program, as we will give way to the K-State Sports Network at 5:30 for pregame coverage of K-State women's basketball, the 12th ranked team in the country. Somebody's going to have to explain to me how they're 15-1 and their only loss is to a team they also beat, who's the number 3 team in the country, I think, Iowa. And they moved down a spot last week from 11 to 12 in the AP Top 25. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but they've got opportunities ahead of them this week at home, 2-game homestand this week for the K-State women. They are hosting Oklahoma tonight at Bramlage. And again, we'll be out of here on 580 Sports Talk ahead of pregame at 5:30 and the tip-off at 6. Lots to get to still on the program. We'll do a big headline segment in the 5 o'clock hour, cover the big news of today. The big news in the world of sports is that Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. If you know me, you know I have some thoughts and maybe some feelings and maybe some emotions about how that has all gone down today. Carroll held a press conference an hour ago. Doesn't sound like he was ready to step aside, but it at least is an amicable parting of the ways between those two parties. We ended up, if you've been listening to the show, I think it was either last week or the week before, we were playing a game of either or over under, Brendan and I. And Brendan asked me over under 6.5 coaching vacancies in the NFL. And my gut said over immediately, but then the more I thought about it, the more it looked like, well, some of these teams that are really stinky have already said they're going to keep their coaches. Like the Jets are going to keep Robert Saleh. The Bengals weren't going to fire Zach Taylor despite missing the playoffs. It certainly didn't think Mike Vrabel was going to be fired in Tennessee. I think I ultimately settled on the over because I figured there would be a surprise firing. And as it turns out, there have been 2, Vrabel yesterday, and now a vacancy in Seattle for the first time since prior to the 2010 season. It'll be fascinating to see what direction they go in, but we'll save some of those thoughts for headlines. We'll also have the injury report from today for Chiefs Dolphins. We'll talk about the Bears overhauling their offensive coaching staff. Look at who the players in the NFL think deserve to be all pros. And we'll get into a little bit of broader college hoops as well, because the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country both lost to unranked teams on the road last night. And I think that speaks to a larger point about how competitive this year's college basketball season is going to be. But that's coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. Still in this hour, we've got What Is Wrong With You, sponsored by Top City Metal Supply. That's coming up here in just a little bit. Also, Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com is going to join me. We'll get Fitz's thoughts on K-State basketball and any K-State football news we can think of to talk about as well. Fitz will join us bottom of this hour in the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline for a weekly edition of the Wildcat Wrap-Up. And, of course, your thoughts, your takes are welcome. You are invited and encouraged, as I like to say, to be a part of this program. You can do so in the comments on the YouTube live stream. We have a live chat going on. Lots of fun people hang out in the live chat. We appreciate everybody who posts a comment. We can read those on the air as well. We see those as they come in. Also, reading your text, 785-272-9429 is the text line That's 785-272-9429 to text in to the program. And I want to throw this question out to you, the listener, and would love to know how you would answer this question, because I think there are different ways to answer this question. But which team has the most to lose in this NFL postseason? Now, obviously, only one team gets to win. Playoffs, as a whole, as a general rule, generate losers. I think it was John Boyes of now Secret Base, formerly SB Nation Video, once laid out that that's what the NCAA tournament, the basketball tournament is. It's a loser machine. It's a loser generator, because 68 teams enter, 67 of them end their season with a loss. So the worst way possible to end a season, right? You don't want to end a season walking off the court in defeat, walking off the field with your heads hung low, but that's the reality. There are 14 NFL playoff teams. 13 of them are going to end their season with the taste of defeat in their mouths. So, obviously, there is only one team that can win the playoffs. But who stands to lose the most in the playoffs? That is the question that I would ask each and every one of you. Holy cow, we got breaking football news that maybe we need to get to ahead of this. We'll get to this in greater detail in headlines, but Nick Saban is retiring per Chris Lowe of ESPN. That's all the detail we have, but Nick Saban is retiring from coaching. That is according to Chris Lowe of ESPN. So no further details on that yet. We'll see if any come out, if there's a statement from University of Alabama or from Nick Saban himself, and we'll get to that in the 5 o'clock hour, certainly. But my goodness, what a day of headlines. Pete Carroll out in Seattle and Nick Saban retiring. That is going to change the face of college football moving forward. Because if you can recall, Alabama has been a great football program and has the desire to be great, has more want to than any other major college football program. But it has also only been as great as the men who have coached there over time. And you might be able to have one good season at Alabama if you're not a great coach. Like Mike Dubose, I think, was SEC Coach of the Year once. Mike Shula had him in the top 10 one year. But, you know, if you want to win big at Alabama, you got to be an all-time great like Bear Bryant and Nick Saban. Nick Saban retiring. That is absolutely stunning news today. That's going to take some time to digest, to be completely honest with you, to form more coherent thoughts about that. I'm going to need until that 5 o'clock hour. So I hope you'll give me a little grace there to put some thoughts together on Nick Saban calling it a career. That is the breaking news presently. So we'll get to that in the 5 o'clock hour, and all those other headlines I mentioned, aside from Pete Carroll retiring, we may not get to those after all. We'll have to see. But anyway, I want to throw that hypothetical, that theoretical, I guess, back at you listeners. Who has the most to lose in this NFL postseason? There are, I think, two categories that you can put teams in when you start the football playoffs. And this is the case, I think, in every season in the NFL. You have the teams that are just happy to be there and the teams who expect to win it all, the Super Bowl or bust group. And I think it's kind of a clean split this year. You have 7 teams that are pretty obviously just happy to be there. Those are the Texans, Browns, and Steelers in the AFC, and the Rams, the Buccaneers, and the Packers in the NFC. We were talking about competitive windows earlier on the show in regards to the NFL, in regards to the Chiefs, whose competitive window will stay open as long as Patrick Mahomes is their quarterback. Well, the Texans might be at the beginning of their competitive window with C.J. Stroud. He looks like that guy. He really does. And Jordan Love took on the look of that guy this year for the Green Bay Packers. So they might be at the beginning of their Jordan Love window. The Rams and Steelers, happy to be here. They're here because they have top 5 head coaches in the league, to be real frank about it. They have Sean McVay is the coach of the Rams. He's one of the best coaches in football. Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in football. That's why the Rams and the Steelers are playoff teams. They overachieved this year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are here because of the league rule that dictates every division champion must play in the postseason. It's a rule. And nothing we can do about that. So the Buccaneers are here, maybe hoping to play spoiler against the defending NFC champs, but the expectation in Tampa is not that they will win another championship. The Browns are here because they're tremendously resilient as a group, and they're pretty well coached by Kevin Stefanski, but this season still feels like an outlier for the Browns. It doesn't feel like the start or the end of anything. They just had a really nice year, and they're in the postseason. Anything happens for them is gravy. But those are the teams that are just happy to be here. What about the other 7? Teams that feel like they can win it all or should win it all, or it's a disappointing year if they don't win it all. Obviously, that's the case for your 2 number 1 seeds, the Ravens, the 49ers. It's the case, certainly, for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's the case for the Buffalo Bills. It's the case for the Dallas Cowboys, who really only don't feel like they have a real chance to win it all because they are the Cowboys. A highlight reel of the Cowboys' playoff wins in high definition that were broadcast originally in HD would be approximately as long as this sentence I'm finishing now. It's not a real great recent playoff history, but the Cowboys also always exist in a place where they're Super Bowl or bust because they're the Cowboys. And they've got 5 of those banners in that giant spaceship in Arlington. And Jerry Jones wants one more before he is watching the Cowboys from the same hole in the roof that he put there so God could watch his favorite team. Like, the Cowboys are always in that space. They're always in that Super Bowl or bust space. And they've been great at home this year. I would expect them to continue to be great at home. But if they don't at least reach the NFC Championship game, they're going to have a lot of questions that they're going to have to answer. Because I think roster-wise, they probably are good enough to get to the Super Bowl this year. But there's a reason it hasn't happened for them before. There's a reason nobody trusts them to win a big road game. There's a reason people, including myself, consider them a bit fraudulent. And if they don't answer those fraud allegations, if they don't beat those fraud allegations, it's going to be an uncomfortable offseason in Dallas. But that's nothing new. The Eagles and the Dolphins exist in a place where they belong in that Super Bowl or bust tier, but they also don't feel like they have a real chance to win it all. The Dolphins, because they are beat up. A healthy Dolphins team, I think, might feel pretty good coming into the playoffs. They are not that. They are way not that. And the Eagles don't look like they're enjoying playing football right now. They don't look like they're having a lot of fun being around each other right now. Both of those teams, though, have some big financial decisions to make beyond this season. So neither team's going to blow it up. It's not like the Dolphins or the Eagles are going to have different quarterbacks or anything like that. But both of those teams are going to look pretty different next season. So it feels like the end of an opportunity a little bit for the Dolphins and the Eagles if they don't win the Super Bowl this year. So that leaves the Ravens, the 49ers, the Bills, and the Chiefs. And I will say right now for the record, I will be surprised if the Super Bowl champion is not one of those 4 teams. The Ravens, the Niners, the Chiefs, and the Bills. If you give me those 4 teams, you can have the field. I think the Super Bowl champion will be one of those 4 teams. I think those are the 4 best teams left. I think those are the 4. I don't know about best coach. I can't put Buffalo in a best coach, but I think they're the best put together. The Bills are in a category where they are getting their confidence, getting their mojo back, so to speak. And they're as dangerous as anybody because they have a great quarterback. The Ravens, I think, are the best team in football. They're my pick to win the whole thing. The 49ers, I think, are clearly the best team in the NFC. And barring an injury like they had with Purdy last year, I think they're going to win the NFC. And then that leaves the Chiefs. We talked about them at the top of the show, where this might be the last great chance for Chris Jones to win a ring. This might be the last chance for prime Travis Kelce to win a ring. And I think that is an urgency that exists for the Chiefs that can be healthy. I think that urgency maybe hurt them in the regular season when they were struggling, but I think that urgency can be a positive for them as they enter the postseason. Which team do you think has the most to lose in these NFL playoffs if they do not finish the deal? Some YouTube comments. Vance says it's the Eagles. Yeah, it will be fascinating to see what happens to the Eagles if they lose to Tampa Bay. Like, if they make a run, if they put it together and they reach the NFC Championship game and they lose, I think they'll get credit for being able to piece it together after a really difficult December and early January. And that might buy Nick Sirianni a little credibility and make things feel a little better for the Eagles. But if they get bounced early, if they are not in the conference championship game, uncomfortable conversations are coming. And a lot of them will surround Sirianni. Paul chips in on the YouTube comments, says it's the Chiefs. Says, hear me out. They clearly need to overhaul their wide receiver room after this season. Let's pretend for a moment the Chiefs put it together offensively. They managed to get to perhaps even win the Super Bowl. Does that affect the desire to make major changes at wide receiver? Do a couple of guys save their jobs by making a late impact? I think these wide receivers are who they are, and I don't think that the Chiefs would be fooled by like a 4-game Marquez Valdez-Scantling renaissance if it were to be something like that occurred en route to another championship. I think there is the understanding that this wide receiver room was limited this year, that it made Patrick Mahomes' job harder when you have the best quarterback in the world. Maybe you should try to make his job a little easier. I still think there will be changes on that side of the ball, because I do think also that is the thing that is most likely to get the Chiefs eliminated. They just don't have the big play. They don't have the ability to go and get a touchdown when they need to go get a touchdown. If the Chiefs don't win the Super Bowl, that will probably be the reason why. But if they do win the Super Bowl, I don't think the wide receivers are going to get undue credit unless like Sky Moore comes off the IR and has a Terrell Owens in Super Bowl. What was that? It's going to bother me. 36, 37. What Super Bowl was that? The Eagles-Patriots Super Bowl? 39. Super Bowl 39. Yeah. The Sky Moore or MVS goes out and has a Terrell Owens in Super Bowl 39 performance in the playoffs. I don't think that necessarily is a job saver for them. It might, maybe for Moore because he's got more team control, but like MVS is not going to be a Chief next year, even if he catches 2 touchdowns in a Super Bowl win. But I think that's an interesting way to phrase it, Paul, because I think that shows there's something to gain for some of these Chiefs in the postseason if they are able to put it together and make a Super Bowl run. We're taking another break here on 580 Sports Talk. This is a good take, too, real quick. I'll get to this on the text line from the 785. Said that I think the Bengals are on borrowed time, even if they're not still playing. They will not be this good again, not in the next 5 years. They are a team like the Dolphins, kind of like the Bills, where they're going to have some big financial decisions to make. The Chargers fall into this category where they put a lot of eggs in this year's basket. And if they don't get it done, what do the forthcoming years look like? Do they have to take some things apart to build them back up around franchise quarterbacks? All 4 of those teams have their franchise quarterback. What do you do with that moving forward? Interesting point. Good text from the 785. Now we'll take our break. What is wrong with you's next here on 580 Sports Talk? It's What Is Wrong With You time on 580 Sports Talk, brought to you as always by Top City Metal Supply. Top City Metal cuts the metal you need to your specifications, saving time, money, and material. Never settle when it comes to metal. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. Trying to take down our champion, the Gorilla Wedding, and joining me for our round of stories today, thanks to the magic of radio, it's Brendan Wrzezinski. Oh my God, Brendan's here.
What's going on,
Brendan's
Dan?
here.
Hey.
It's the magic of radio. Brendan's here to do What Is Wrong With You. We're going to have fun with our two stories today. Gorilla Wedding, our champion from yesterday. By the way, Brendan, I looked this up yesterday.
Okay.
I Googled Gorilla Wedding. And by the way, not Gorilla Wedding, not like
the ape.
Not like Magilla Gorilla for Sale wedding. Gorilla, like surprise, sneak attack, like fighters. I Googled Gorilla Wedding. It's a thing.
Really?
People do this.
I hate that.
Typically, though, they don't do it in the fashion of these folks who stormed a small coffee shop that was attached to a larger venue and just did their wedding in there. Typically, it happens like outside. Or like maybe on the steps of a building or something like that. Something where you are not keeping the people who own the business that you're storming from doing business. And then saying, well, no, we're actually not going to pay you for it. Okay, fine. We'll give you $200. Like, no, our fee is this. You owe us this. This is our fee. You owe us at least this. And then to say back, no, actually, you're being unreasonable.
That's ridiculous. I had no idea that was a thing, but at least like, in a park or somewhere in public, you can understand like, okay, yeah, you're fine. It's kind of an open space. You're keeping this business hostage.
Yes. And you're acting like they're your servants. Like they take care of my coat, watch my purse, all this stuff that you're doing. The photographer and the officiant. Why did they come? Like the photographer, typically the photographer, a wedding photographer needs to see your contract for where you're having your wedding.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the case for your photographer. I believe it was the case for my wife and I, our photographer.
It wasn't for ours, but I know that when we talked to him, we were like, hey, this is where we're doing it. And he said, oh, okay, I know the area. I've done things there at the venue there before. Like, fine. Like you usually have to have some amount of knowledge of where you're doing what you're doing. I also, how did no guest say, hey, should we be doing this? Like, should I really be just dumping my coat on this poor waitress? Like, should I be doing this?
It's just entitlement. All the way around, it's just peak entitlement, and it's very few things are as frustrating as people when they act that kind of entitled. So that is our current champ, the Gorilla Wedding. 2 new stories today. Brendan, you lead us off.
All right. For my story, have you ever come across a Facebook group? There's a trend of these out there these days. Something to the effect of, are we dating the same guy? You ever seen a group like that?
I am familiar with the concept, yes.
Well, we're about to become familiar with Chicago man Nico D'Ambrosio, who filed a complaint against a long list of individuals and platforms seeking damages he alleges incurred because of a Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook group. Ambrosio is suing 27 women, 1 man, 20 different parts of the Facebook Corporation, the Meta Corporation, Patreon, GoFundMe, and the website arewedatingthesame.com, claiming they're responsible for damages incurred when women posted online about alleged negative experiences they had on dates with him. There are hundreds of these such groups on Facebook for major cities around the world, and a standalone website that acts as a searchable database for finding these types of men and women. Is originally popped up in New York City if you haven't heard of these before. So in D'Ambrosio's case, according to the complaint, women used the Chicago Facebook group to call him, quote, clingy, and also said that he had ghosted them after sleeping with them. One poster said, quote, he's been posted here before. The poster said he sent her a slew of texts calling her names because she didn't want to spend the night with him. That was one commenter, according to some screenshots used in the complaint. Another commenter referred to him as, quote, a psycho. According to the complaint, he and the woman who originally posted about him met organically at a cultural event in Chicago and briefly communicated. The plaintiff and defendant then engaged in a consensual encounter on the evening they first met. They spent brief periods of time together on a handful of occasions, which were unremarkable. The parties never engaged in an exclusive dating relationship. The defendants broadcast their outrageous, cruel, and malicious lies about the plaintiff with knowledge that the statements were false or with reckless disregard as whether or not they were true. This was filed on Monday in the district court for Northern Illinois.
Yeah, probably inevitable that one of those groups would lead to something like this at some point. I mean, you can't just go around saying stuff about people like that on a public forum and not think that person, it's going to get back to that person. And yeah, I understand taking umbrage, but on the other hand, if this stuff is true, like,
so,
don't be a terrible romantic partner, I guess, would be my advice to Nico here.
So the counts in this complaint include defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy by false light, civil liability for doxing, misappropriation, unjust enrichment, and public disclosure of private facts. And he is specifically requesting a trial by jury. He has claimed he has suffered and will continue to suffer significant general, actual, consequential, and special damages, including impairment of reputation and standing in the community, personal humiliation, mental anguish and suffering, emotional distress, stress, anxiety, lost earnings, and other pecuniary loss.
I don't know where the lost earnings is. Like, did he lose his job over this? Like,
is he a gigolo? Is that why?
That could be, could be some lost earnings there. Yeah. I on the one hand, I'm like a touch sympathetic. Because if these claims are exaggerated in any way, like somebody calling you a psycho, like that would hurt.
That's extreme.
That's a lot. But at the same time, you got to understand if you're not treating people nice, then everything is a public forum. That's the social media era. Everything is a public forum. You run the risk of getting aired out on some kind of form of social media if you treat somebody bad.
Also, the fact it's a red flag for me that he's been posted on this group multiple times makes me think maybe there's something going on with our guy Nico. By the way, we always encourage listener contributions for What Is Wrong With You. This one from my father-in-law.
Oh, how about that?
So appreciate Rich sending this one in.
Outstanding. That's one story today. The next story is going to take us to South Brunswick, New Jersey, where James Leonard was arrested last week after passing counterfeit 50s and 100s at a Wawa over the course of several months. James Leonard used the fake money, which is designed to be used on movie sets and can be ordered online at the convenience store on George's Road. The 41-year-old was charged with theft by deception and uttering a forged document. Leonard went into the Wawa at busy times, so cashiers didn't have time to scrutinize the bills. It wasn't until the money arrived at a bank that the fake currency was discovered. This is where I have the problem with the story. The bills had the phrase "for motion picture use only" across the top and in smaller print on the left side. It'd be one thing if it was just in the smaller print. It's gigantic next to Ben Franklin's head. It is unmistakable. You can't miss "for motion picture use only." You absolutely cannot.
No.
So a bit of laziness, a bit of a carelessness on the part of the Wawa folks. After the store learned Leonard was allegedly passing fake money, his photo was posted in the Wawa. A store manager told police Leonard had passed about $600 in fraudulent hundreds since September. He also passed a fake $100 bill at the store on November 27th and another last Thursday before paying with a fake $50 bill on Friday. And that was finally what got him caught. So he has been caught and arrested for using the funny money at the Wawa. And this is in part, don't use funny money. And also, I don't care how busy you are. You can't miss the "for motion picture use only" on these bills.
Yeah, that is very obvious. All right, so a couple of thoughts here. One, I give him actually props because a lot of our "What Is Wrong With You" criminals don't have any sort of plan at all. This guy at least thought they're not going to check because it's going to be too busy. So at least he had some sort of criminal mastermind in him. When I worked in food service, when I was a cashier, we had a rule that at any time, no matter how busy it was, we had a little magic marker next to the registers. And if someone gave you anything bigger than a 20, you had to stripe it and hold it up to the light and see if it was real.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to do, man.
No.
It's really not. And also,
especially for big bills.
Yeah. It tells you right on the thing. I am amazed by the number of people who continually commit crimes at the same place, especially very obvious crimes. Because while, again, I give him credit for actually having some idea of how to get away with his caper here, like at some point you're going to get caught. Because what happens if usually it's busy at 1:30, but then you show up and it's not? Also, who pays with hundreds?
Yeah, you go to the Wawa, get your hoagie pay with $100.
Get
out of there.
$94 and change.
Yeah, seriously. 20, 40, 60, 80. Hey, you start to recognize the guy after the while, I think. Like, man, this guy, he sure is coming to this well a lot. There's a reason that you hear about people going to the well one too many times and not the appropriate number of times. Nobody ever goes to the well the appropriate number of times.
Imagine the indignity of having your face posted up in the Wawa.
Do not accept currency from this man. Who wins today?
Man. These are both good stories. I'm going to lean with this Facebook guy and the fact that he's trying to sue Facebook and GoFundMe. What does GoFundMe have to do with any of this? What does Patreon have to do with anything with this?
Yeah, this guy who's just a crappy boyfriend or romantic partner is, he's doing a lot, but I don't think, I'm still mad about the gorilla wedding.
No, they infuriate me.
Yeah.
I hate them.
That survives for another day as our What Is Wrong With You champion. Once again, sponsored by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order when you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. That's a wrap for What Is Wrong With You. Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com joins us next here on 580 Sports Talk. certainly thought that that there were going to be stars on this team, that the stars were going to be Tyler Perry and Arthur Kaluma and then Naquan Tomlin. Obviously, we know what happened there. But Cam Carter and I think lately David Gasson has started to produce, maybe not at star levels, but producing at higher levels as they go along. How much does that speak to the player development aspect of what K-State wants to do, that they are having success, they are seeing success with Gasson and Carter growing as the season goes along?
I think Cam Carter is kind of stealing the show here with this team, with this season. He was really good at times last night. And what I find interesting about him is he's doing things now with his game that we didn't even perceive he had. He's all of a sudden a guy getting the alley-oop every game from Tyler Perry because he flies above the rim so high. And he's taking the ball to the hole with great effectiveness, which is something, we didn't see him really do last year. He had a great interior pass, kind of a Marquise Noel, one-handed thing last night that led to an easy lay-in for Will McNair. He's really expanded his game. I'm very impressed. And Gasson is just blue collar. I mean, now that he's hitting his free throws at a higher rate, he becomes less a liability, but his work defensively and rebounding should never be forgotten.
When I think about Jerome Tang, I think about faith and belief. And there's the religious aspect of that is obviously very important to Jerome Tang in his personal life. But I also think that manifests in faith and belief in his guys, belief in his players. And so when I look at the improvement that guys like Carter and Gasson have shown, or Jarrell Colbert, who was essentially in witness protection for the better part of the last month, to come in last night, be a +9 with 2 emphatic block shots in 6 minutes. It feels like Jerome Tang has a tremendous amount of belief still in his guys. Between that and now this team knowing that this is the team, there's no Naquan Tomlin coming, Quest Glover's out for the year, they've got who they've got. Does it feel like this is a group that's settling into, as you kind of put it, knowing who they are, what their identity is going to be?
Right. I think they are. And I feel like part of the improvement is Tyler Perry's kind of relaxing a little bit. Granted, he didn't shoot the ball great again last night, but I think he's just becoming more at home in what he's being asked to do on this team. And, I appreciate so much guys like Jarrell Colbert or Dorian Finister who pay their dues, who, go to practice every day and do things the right way. And now Dorian, who honestly I was really surprised to see them put him on the floor so much. 6 points last night, and they were all on dunks. I'm like, when did Dorian Finister start playing above the rim? So this staff does a brilliant job of building confidence and belief on their roster. And, it's just part of that crazy faith that you mentioned. It's just really believing in where you're going as a team, believing in your teammates, believing in yourself, and going out there and getting it done. And we'll see how far it takes them in the Big 12 this year, because this conference is going to be hard to navigate.
Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com, joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. This is the Wildcat Wrap-Up. We do it every Wednesday at this time here on 580 Sports Talk. Jerome Tang talked before the start of Big 12 play, said, hey, 9 wins probably gets us into the NCAA tournament, paraphrasing here, that 9 wins, a 500 record in the league, would be good enough to get K-State dancing. They're 2/9 of the way to that goal. How realistic do you feel it's more realistic now, or do you feel like these 2 games maybe didn't prove as much because they were against the teams that might finish 13th and 14th in this league?
Yeah, they just helped this team kind of build some confidence and get in a rhythm. I think we all recognize that Tech on Saturday is going to be a much more significant test than what these 2 have been. And then you come home for, I believe it's Baylor and Oklahoma State. Again, I kind of feel like at worst you're going to be 3-2 coming out of those first 5 games. If you're there, you're on course. And if you're at 4 or even 5 wins, you're way ahead of the curve. So they just got to, just keep plugging away and taking them one at a time, which is cliche, but literally what they need to do. They just can't worry about who they've beaten or who they're going to play, except for the team right in front of them at that moment.
Let's ask a quick question about the K-State basketball team who plays tonight, the 12th ranked women, going for a 16-1 start as they take on Oklahoma tonight at Bramlage Coliseum. Is this Jeff Mitty's best team?
Oh, by far. This has the possibility of being the best K-State women's team in history, and there were some really great ones in the early 2000s or so. So it's they just got to keep plugging away. They got to take care of this business at home, and if they get past Oklahoma, they get Texas, which is a couple spots ahead of it in the poll, and an opportunity to climb into the top 10 with back-to-back wins, including a team just right ahead of you in the poll.
Talk a little football here, Fitz. The final AP Top 25 poll coming out. K-State ranked 18th in the final AP Top 25. A couple of too early Top 25s have come out from some national publications. K-State getting some love in those. Ranked around the 20s. I think they were 21st in the ESPN poll, the 24th in the athletics poll from Stuart Mandel. Is that a reasonable starting point for expectations next year for K-State, that's about where they'd like to aim for, is that bottom half of the top 25? Is that a reasonable starting point for expectations?
Yeah, I think it is. And you know what? I almost sense a little bit change in approach with Kansas State. Kansas State has always been a team that is judged from one season to the next on what they've lost, not what they've gained. It's like you're never going to get over losing these guys. You've got to drop you down out of the poll. I think the bowl game let people see, they've got some young guys in the system that can really play. Maybe they're going to be okay. And so that's not typically something. I would venture to guess most years you see K-State drop from the end of the poll, the end of the season poll, to the start of the new season poll. And I don't think that's, they're doing a little bit maybe, but I don't think that's necessarily the case this year. I think people think that K-State will just kind of keep chugging along now, despite, losing some of these guys that have been so crucial during Chris Kleiman's first 5 years.
A question, if I may, about a former Kansas State Wildcat. We didn't get a chance to discuss this because I think it happened last Thursday. Will Howard committing to Ohio State to play his final year of college football eligibility. How do you think he'll fare in Columbus?
Well, he's going to have some receivers. There's no doubt about that. I got to admit, I'm intrigued to see what he can do with, the type of weapons that Ohio State puts out there around their quarterback. I think Will did a tremendous job at Kansas State, considering I think the receivers have been one of the weakest position groups on this team for a number of years. That doesn't mean they have no players there, but they certainly don't have the type of depth you want to be really effective at receiver. I mean, you really do have to have 3 or 4 guys that can burn you, so nobody can focus on one individual. They've always had basically one individual, if they had one at all. So now going into a team where they kind of have become known as Receiver U, I'm all in. I want to see what happens with this, and I hope Will has great success.
Certainly seems as though K-State has made a focus on receiver in the transfer portal. How realistic is it that there might be another addition or two forthcoming at the wide receiver spot out of the portal?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think they're looking at a number of guys here that they're trying to, wrap up. And it's been difficult without until recently, they haven't had an offensive coordinator named. They didn't really know what kind of system they were going to run. But I think they're going to go find some guys. Defense out of Penn State seems like Ryan Wallace has put in a crystal ball for him coming to Kansas State. And there's some other dudes out there that they're in on, and we'll see how it all pans out. But in the world of the NIL, you just don't know what is fueling a young man's decision. Well, you never have, but now with the NIL, it gets really complicated. Because, in asking around, I'm told K-State isn't failing in the NIL space. They're just, getting out-recruited with other factors, including playing time, offense, and those type of things. So maybe that'll settle down now that they do have a good idea where the offense is going.
Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com joins us every Wednesday for the Wildcat Wrap-Up. Again, check out his work at GoPowerCat.com. Find him on Twitter at Life of Fitz. Fitz, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, my friend.
That is Tim Fitzgerald. This is 580 Sports Talk, back after the news. Let's get it. Final hour, really final half hour of this Wednesday edition of 580 Sports Talk. Welcome in. Thanks for hanging out today, whether you've been listening on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or via the YouTube stream on our YouTube page, 580 Sports Talk. However you've been tuned in today, thanks for hanging out with me on this hump day on 580 Sports Talk. I am Dan Lucero. Brendan Dworzinski is in Warrensburg, Missouri, for Washburn basketball against UCM. They tip off in about 10 minutes. Or I'm sorry, the broadcast starts in about 10 minutes. They tip off at 5:30. You can hear that over on our sister station, Classic Country 106.9. You can also catch K-State women's basketball here tonight on 580 WIBW FM 104.9. K-State women hosting Oklahoma. That's why it's only a half hour here left on the show. We'll be off at 5:30 for pregame, 6 o'clock tip from Bramlage Coliseum. There's a lot to get to in headlines today. A whole lot to get to in headlines today. So we're not going to waste any time getting into headlines today. We'll start with a quick run through the injury report today for the Chiefs and the Dolphins ahead of the Saturday wild card weekend matchup. We'll keep it local for our first headline. Only one Chief did not practice today. That was Wanye Morris. He remains in concussion protocol, and he did not practice. Justin Ross, who didn't practice Tuesday, was back to practice today, albeit limited with a hamstring. Also limited today, Kadarius Toney and Donovan Smith. Both were limited Tuesday as well. Toney dealing with hip and ankle injuries. Donovan Smith recovering from that neck injury, and the Chiefs understandably bringing him along slowly because if Wanye Morris can't clear concussion protocol, they're really going to need Donovan Smith at left tackle on Saturday. L'Jarius Sneed was a full participant in practice today with his calf injury after having been limited on Tuesday. So good news on the recovery front for L'Jarius Sneed. Everybody else listed was a full participant for a second consecutive day. Nick Bolton, Deion Bush, Shamari Connor, Noah Gray, Isaiah Pacheco, Rashee Rice, Jawan Taylor, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Jalen Watson, all full participants. For the Dolphins, they had one player upgraded today. That's left tackle Teron Armstead. He didn't practice Tuesday. He was limited today, dealing with knee, ankle, and back problems. Not great for your left tackle. The three DNPs from Tuesday, the three other ones were DNPs again on Wednesday. Three starting members of the Dolphins secondary, safeties Deshaun Elliott and Javon Holland, and cornerback Xavier Howard, all did not practice for a second straight day. Everybody else on the list for the Dolphins remained limited for a second straight day. Running backs Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, wide receivers Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, offensive lineman Liam Eichenberg, and cornerback Jalen Ramsey, all limited for a second straight day. Those are all starters, of course, for the Dolphins. And, of course, this list does not include the three linebackers that they put on injured reserve earlier this week, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jerome Baker, starters both, and Cameron Good, who had been starting at defensive end. So that is the injury picture. It's getting more positive for the Chiefs. It's still pretty murky for the Dolphins as they prepare to come to the cold and wind of Arrowhead Stadium this coming Saturday night. All right. Let's get to the real big sports news today. We're going to start with the bombshell dropped last hour. Nick Saban retiring as the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Chris Lowe of ESPN first to report it. It's been confirmed now by multiple sources, including Brett McMurphy at the Action Network, who says he has a source that tells him or indicates to him that Oregon's Dan Lanning will be not just a target, but potentially the top target for Alabama as they search for their next head coach. Nick Saban, like the other high-profile coach from the pro ranks who is out of a job as of this moment, 72 years old. And what he accomplished the last 17 years at Alabama kind of looks like what it might have looked like for you if you were particularly good at NCAA football video games and ran your dynasty. This is probably what you wanted it to look like. Nick Saban took over Alabama, in the 2007 season The year before, Alabama had gone 6-6 and lost in the Independence Bowl. In 2007, Saban's first season, they were 7-6 and won the Independence Bowl. They beat Colorado in the Independence Bowl that year. Also that year, Alabama lost to Louisiana Monroe. That's where Alabama football, big, bad, proud Alabama was. That was the state of things for Alabama football when Saban took over in 2007. A year after that, they went to the Sugar Bowl and finished 6th in the final AP poll. The year after that, 2009, they ran the table and won the first of 3 BCS national championship games in 4 years. In 2010, Saban's 4th season, Alabama went 10-3. They would never lose 3 games in a season again for as long as Saban was the head coach. Back-to-back national championships followed in 2011 and 2012. After seasons of disappointment in 2013 and 2014, both of which ended with Sugar Bowl losses, Alabama would proceed to play in 6 of the next 7 college football playoff national championship games, winning 3 and losing 3, bringing home the national crown in 2015, 2017, and 2020. Maybe Saban's best team in the COVID year when they went 13-0. His only other undefeated team, along with that 2009 group that went 14-0. They went 11-2, beat K-State in the Sugar Bowl last year. This year, 12-2, and lost in overtime in the Rose Bowl as a college football playoff semifinal. Alabama finished no lower than 10th in the AP Top 25 since 2008. Every year they were in the top 10. Their lowest ranking in that stretch was 10th in 2010 when they lost 3 games. His overall record at Alabama, 206 wins and 29 losses. That is a winning percentage of nearly 88%. He was also 16-7 in postseason games. Prior to that, of course, Saban won a national championship in 2003, winning the Sugar Bowl, the BCS championship, and winning the BCS national championship in AP. Check that. Didn't win the AP title that year, but won the BCS title that year in 2003 when LSU won the Sugar Bowl. He was 48-16 in 5 years at LSU. All-time 297 wins, 71 losses, 1 tie back in 1995 in his first year at Michigan State. I am of the belief that it's harder. It was never harder to be a great college football coach than it was in the modern era. I also believe this about college basketball, for the record. It's why I argue that Mike Krzyzewski is the greatest men's basketball college coach of all time, ahead of John Wooden. Even though John Wooden won the 11 titles in 13 years, college basketball was different in the 90s, and it was different again in the 2000s and in the 2010s, and Krzyzewski won national titles in those eras. Not to say that Wooden couldn't have, but the fact that Krzyzewski did means that's who I argue for when you talk about the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And it's for the same reason I will argue that Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time, because he did it in a vastly and rapidly changing era of college football. His teams were not just consistently good, they were consistently standard setting. If you had to win a national championship, you had to be better than Alabama. That was the criteria. You had to be better than what Nick Saban had built that particular year. They have been the measuring stick in the sport for a decade and a half. Since 2008, they have been the standard-bearing college football program. And that doesn't mean they won it every year, obviously, but it meant if you were going to win, you had to beat them. Just like Michigan did this last year. Just like Georgia did in 2022 in the SEC championship game. Just like Georgia did in 2021 in the college football playoff national title game. Just like Clemson did in 2018 and in 2016 when they won their national titles. If you wanted to be the best, you had to beat the best, and Nick Saban always had the best because he was the best recruiter, because he had a brilliant football mind. Defensive football at all levels has been changed forever because of Nick Saban's teachings and Nick Saban's philosophies. He's not just a recruiting merchant. He's not just a guy that happened into the best job in college football and got lucky to ride the Crimson Wave for 17 years. He's the best that's ever done this. And college football is poorer for his retirement. This tweet was forwarded to me, and I'm also seeing it across my timeline on Twitter as well, from Nick Saban's TV friend, Deion Sanders. He tweeted this: "Wow, college football just lost the GOAT to retirement. Wow. I knew it would happen one day soon, but not this soon. The game has changed so much that it chased the GOAT away. College football, let's hold up our mirrors and say honestly what you see." Now, a bit of rich irony in Deion Sanders pointing out that the transfer portal and the NIL business has altered college football to a high level, as nobody has looked to profit off of that perhaps as much as Deion Sanders has. But he might have a point. And when we had Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com on in the last hour, he said the same thing. He says that Nick Saban is a canary in a coal mine situation where he might be the first of these high-profile college football coaches who decides, I don't want to deal with all this anymore. I don't want to deal with all of this. And I think there might be some merit to that because there are no guardrails to NIL, which we hear that all the time. There are no guardrails to this stuff. We hear that all the time. We know that's true. We also know it to be true that the transfer portal continues to be difficult to navigate. And it's only going to get harder in the 12-team playoff era when the portal opens up during the playoff. While the playoff is still ongoing, the portal will be open. And how are coaches with teams in the playoff going to manage the portal? It's a legitimate question and a legitimate concern for what college football is going to look like. And it is an extra burden on the lives of these college football coaches. However, if ever there was a coach who seemed to embrace that grind, a coach that one year was upset that his team reached the college football playoff national championship, this was widely reported, he was disappointed it cost him a week on the recruiting trail. It was Nick Saban. Saban was about this life, and there's a reason his teams continue to succeed and continue to win as the transfer portal and as NIL became what they became. Because he relentlessly pursued the best talent and relentlessly coached those guys up, and he got them to the league, and they were the team you had to be better than if you were going to win a national championship. An incredible football life. And keep in mind, this guy was on the same NFL coaching staff as Bill Belichick. He once took a job that Pete Carroll had vacated. More about him in a second here. It's a remarkable, remarkable career if this is indeed the end for Nick Saban. And at 72, it may just be as simple as he's 72 years old. I don't know how many 72-year-olds you know, but I think some of them like to have some free time. Like to have a little time with their families, a little time with their wives. We'll hear, I'm sure, from Nick Saban eventually. I'm sure there will be some kind of statement moving forward. I mentioned that Dan Lanning is being named by Brett McMurphy of Action Network as one of the top candidates to replace him. You could literally name anybody. You could name absolutely anybody who is a high-profile college football coach, and they are a candidate because Alabama can hire whoever they want. Nobody in their current job wouldn't drop anything for the promise of Alabama, for the resources of Alabama, for the potential of Alabama. Every single college coach in the country is a candidate for this job. And probably some NFL coaches too, if we're being completely honest about it. But I will say this definitively. When it comes to being the guy that follows the guy, that's not usually a position you want to be in. Just ask, like Ron Prince, for one particular example. Being the guy that follows the guy is hard. Being the guy that follows that guy in that job where the expectation is you win a national championship and anything less than that calls into question your fitness to do the job, that's going to be a rocky ride. And I do not envy the person that signs on for it. So that's one high-profile coaching departure. The other occurred in the NFL when it was announced earlier today that Pete Carroll would no longer be the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. In a statement from the Seahawks chair, Jody Allen, after thoughtful meetings and careful consideration for the best interest of the franchise, we have amicably agreed with Pete Carroll that his role will evolve from head coach to remain with the organization as an advisor. Now, according to Carroll in a press conference he had earlier today, he advocated to keep his own job. He had a meeting with the front office and advocated to keep his own job, believed that he could be the coach that got Seattle back going in the right direction after they missed the playoffs this last year for the second time in 3 years. But after those meetings with the front office, it was mutually agreed upon that Carroll would step aside as a coach and remain with the organization. In 14 years, the Seahawks went 137-89-1. God, I'll never forget that one back in 2016. It was a 6-6 tie on Sunday Night Football against the Arizona Cardinals. It remains the worst football game I've ever watched in my life. But 137-89, and of course, a Super Bowl championship in Super Bowl 48 and 1 yard away from another one the very next year in Super Bowl 49. The highs were very high in the early portion of Pete Carroll's head coaching career in Seattle. Since then, there hadn't been that much playoff success. After that Super Bowl against the Patriots, the Seahawks won just 3 playoff games in the last 9 years. One of them because a kicker missed a 20-yard field goal. One of them because the other team's starting quarterback got hurt. They were 3-6 in the playoffs after 2015. And in the past few years, it become very apparent that the Rams and then the 49ers had far surpassed the Seahawks when it came to talent level, when it came to execution, when it came to scheme. The Seahawks were falling further and further behind. But the fact that they were ever the standard in the NFC West, that's all Pete Carroll. With respect to Mike Holmgren, who I have a great deal of respect for a lot of reasons, who did guide the Seahawks to Super Bowl 40 back in 2005. There are the Seahawks before Pete Carroll, and there is what the Seahawks are now. What it means to be a Seahawk, what it means to play against the Seahawks. The fact that there is a standard for that organization, that's all Pete Carroll. That's all what he brought to that job after he was the surprise hire away from USC back before the 2010 season. And I'll cop to it, as a fan of the franchise, I rolled my eyes when they hired Pete Carroll. I said, this sloganeering, this enthusiasm, this rah-rah stuff, this worked in college. It's never going to work in the pros. No chance it works in the pros. It worked in the pros. It worked really well in the pros. And I was wrong over and over again about Pete Carroll. And I was fully prepared, even after this past season, when I, as a Seahawks fan, was very frustrated with the direction the team was going and felt like they probably needed to make a change, at least schematically. I was prepared to eat my words again, because if there was one thing that Pete Carroll made me as a Seahawks fan do over and over again, it was believe in him. Because they kept finding ways. But the tenure is over, and whatever the Seahawks are moving forward, it will be different, but it will be whatever it is because of what was made possible by Pete Carroll before him. That's it for headlines. We got to take a quick break. Final words next here on 580 Sports Talk. Wrapping up this edition of 580 Sports Talk with a personal, heartfelt thank you to Pete Carroll for 14 years of Seahawks football that I would not have previously imagined possible before he arrived in Seattle. He took something that I love very much, the Seattle Seahawks, and he made them better. And he changed what it means to be a Seahawk, to play like a Seahawk, to root for the Seahawks. All of that is different now. And it's because of Pete Carroll. And I will appreciate that forever. I will take with me little phrases like, it's all about the ball, and you win the game in the fourth quarter, and always compete and win forever. All of those little catchphrases that I thought there was no way would ever play in the NFL. Oh, they played, baby. They played. They played a beautiful tune for 14 years. And whoever is next in that job, there will be lots of speculation about that. I'm excited for a new direction, but I will miss Pete Carroll a great deal. An outstanding NFL coaching career. That's going to do it for this truncated final hour of 580 Sports Talk. We got K-State hoops coming up next. The women are in action tonight. 12th ranked team in the country hosting Oklahoma. That is coming up next. If you want to hear Washburn basketball, that's over on our sister station, Classic Country 106.9 tonight. You can tune in over there to listen to the Ichabods take on UCM in Warrensburg. Until tomorrow, I'm Dan Lucero. This has been 580 Sports Talk.